Welcome to the Think and Tackle podcast. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button so you won't miss an episode. And today we are joined in the studio by Phil Buckley, a man who's managed to hold down a full-time job whilst targeting some of the most difficult waters on the UK carp scene. Phil, thank you so much for coming in, mate.
Pleasure.
And I know that time is of the essence for you a lot of the time, and you're a guy that works full-time, so it makes it all the more special that you've made time for us.
No problem.
It's partly why I wanted to get you in, mate, and that is because I feel like we really needed to reflect what life is like for the big fish man who wants to do it on his own terms. I think it'd be fair to say that, you know, as a die-hard weekender, Phil, you've been doing it on your own terms for a long time, haven't you, mate?
Yeah, since the start, really. I've been in the job I've currently got. I've been there since I was 17 years old.
Wow.
So, yeah, I've only known trying to balance big carp angling around a full-time job. And yeah, it's tough. You're trying to fit in. I mean, I work 4.5 days. It is full time, but I have a lunchtime finish on a Friday, which is probably one of the reasons I've always stayed there. You get the jump on those weekenders. Yeah. But yeah, it's tough. You're trying to fit it all in. I mean, when I was really young, I lived with my parents, you know, bedroom, a single man. It's easier. Obviously, you can kind of focus pretty much. You can cut the two off and it's all work and then it's all fishing. It's a lot harder now, you know, marriage, mortgage, a career, trying to fit it all in. But I've only known it that way. And yeah, I like it. I like the challenge of that, you know. Don't get me wrong. I think we'd all like the extra night every week. But if you don't know no different, you run with what you got.
So what did a week, let's say, what did a week look like for you, let's say pre-marriage and stuff, when you had a bit more time, like potentially?
So my working day would be 8 a.m. till 5. I get a lunch break. It's worth saying I've never worked close to any lake I've fished, so I've never had the option to nip out in my lunch break. So it would be 4 days of 8 till 5. It's an 8 till 1 finish on a Friday. So the car would be loaded first light Friday morning. 1 p.m. I'm the guy at the front of the queue. I'm clocking out and I'm gunning it up that motorway to try and get to the lake as quickly as I can. I mean, back when like something like Yateley, for instance, I'd be up there every night as well. I would finish work at 5 p.m. I'd grab a burger when I got to Yateley in the little parade area, shoot to the lake. I'd be there till 10, 11 o'clock, sponging cups of tea, trying to take it all in. Yeah. You'd roll into bed at midnight. You'd be up at 7 to go to work again. And that was the working week. You know, I was just so immersed in that particular place.
So were you doing... I don't want to park Yateley entirely, but we do want to come back to that because there's such richness there, like for presumably your fishing. Were you doing overnights as well, Phil? Just to clarify.
On Yateley, yes, I was. I fished Berfield before that. That was when I first started driving. Yeah. So prior to that, I was reliant on lifts. So as soon as I passed my driving test, I was doing overnighters on Berfield, and then Yateley I was doing. You could only do one night a week because you had a time limit, so it's 48 on. Yeah, I can't remember if it's 48 on, 48 off, but there was 48-hour rule, and then you could squeeze in a work night as well. So every week I did the work night as well
because that was key to building the patterns that would allow you to sort of.
Not even that. I just wanted to be there all the time.
Pure rod hours.
Yeah. I mean, I was at the lake every night regardless. But the night that I could put the rods in as well, they came with me. So
wow, I mean that's obsession, that's intoxication, isn't it? By the
that place does it to you though. I mean, it's. I was speaking to a friend of mine who was there at the same time recently, and I mean it's a long time ago that I fished there now. It was 07, 08. I was only there a short time, sort of 18 months, and we both sort of agreed that. Never fished a lake like it in terms of one that just sucks you in, almost like the community that Yateley had. You know, it was like a little community within carp fishing itself. You get to that lake, even like now, I stop off in the Tesco's when I pass through.
Great Tesco's.
It's a great Tesco's, and I might see half a dozen people in this little Tesco's Metro that I know, and I don't see them for years, and it's you know, and it feels like I live in Yateley, even though I've never lived anywhere near it. You know, because it's just that community feel that it has. Unique place.
Honestly, Phil, Yateley, if you go to that Tesco Express, not only does it do fantastic chocolate croissant, We've all had them, yeah.
I love how you're talking it like a Tesco's, like it's a local pub or something.
Well, and also like they don't all do them, but they definitely do.
Not all the same.
But no, particularly Yateley, I'm a sucker for the for the patisserie, but more, but like you said, that little bit between the Tesco Express and that little parade, you see so many anglers.
Yeah, it's
still a hub, isn't it? Even now,
it is a hotbed of a lot of carp fishing history, isn't it? That one little strip in Hampshire, Surrey. So much has gone on and existed in that one little area, and it shaped the carp fishing that we're in now. Plays a big part.
Massively. Even just the word Yateley conjures up carp. You can't have that and not carp. For most people who live in Yateley village, they haven't got a clue what the significance is.
They've got no idea what they live in. Yeah.
But before we get too fixated on Yateley, because I do want to talk about that, because it's fair to say the results you had there were, you punched above your weight, no doubt. In terms of what the big ones that you caught. But take us back, Phil, because I want to talk a little bit about inspirations, because I want to understand how a guy who's just passed his driving test feels like he can tackle Berfield. One of the like what happened to you before then? What were the things you drew from to make you want to do that?
Okay, so when I started carp fishing, I fished 2 little park lakes local to me. And
is that Hampshire? That's Hampshire, right?
That's Hampshire, yeah. So I live in Hampshire. There was 2 little park lakes, tiny little. They were match pools, really, but they had some carp in. Actually, they were really lovely, gnarly old carp, but they were few and far between. At the same time as fishing them, I was starting to get into the barbel fishing on the rivers, and I was really inspired by passion for angling and kind of the antique tackle. And I remember getting a Trudex centre pin for a birthday. I can't remember what birthday it would have been. I might have been 14, 15. And I was using that centre pin, stalking carp in the margins on that park lake. And I bumped into a chap who was several years older than me, a guy called Kevin, who's a really, really great angler, really great specialist angler. And we became friends. And he stopped because he saw me using a centre pin and thought, that's unusual on a match pool to see a guy, stalking fish in the edge. That took me to the opportunity to fish a water on the Wazen estate. It was called Brimpton, or that was what we knew it as, Brimpton Syndicate. And there's quite a nice little bit of history there because the brute in Pingewood originally come from that lake. Anyway, Kevin had the opportunity to run a syndicate on that water, and it was a 10-man syndicate. And it sounds like I'm name dropping, I am in a way, but one of the members of there was Phil Thompson. Another guy was Darren Ward Tetley, who at one point, did he have Mary at a British record? Wait, he was the tench record holder, wasn't he? He caught a record tench from Sheepwalk.
That's right. Yeah,
I
think it's still the record.
It might even still be the record. Yeah.
So
I bumped into those 2, and that was my first exposure to proper big fish anglers. These were guys that had fished Raysbury, and I was already aware of it through Terry Hearn's writings, I guess. But that kind of opened my eyes to that world. Long story short, I fished that syndicate. What we didn't realise is pretty much all the carp had been moved from there. So we might have been fishing for a dozen carp in a 10-acre pool. I blanked the first year, which is quite a common theme. The second year, I nicked 1. And pretty soon I ended up at Yateley Match Lake because I was like, right, I'm ready now. I don't know why I thought that, because I didn't really have a body of work behind me to take to the Match Lake to think that I'm ready for that. But I somehow ended up there with some friends. I'm guessing it was just Terry at the time. He was so influential to all of us. And that was the start of it. I was fishing Yateley Match Lake, but pretty quickly we realised this is a busy lake. It was a circuit water at the time. We didn't have a lot of time. We were turning up on a Friday afternoon and we were slotting in, and our results were kind of mirroring that. And me and my friends John and Simon, we were looking for somewhere to go. And this was back when Leisure Sport had the brochure. The brochure. Berfield, it didn't have any pictures of the lake, but it had a picture of the common Malcolm Tab. You remember that picture?
Yeah.
It was £45 from the dog leg. And we were like, well, that lake's got a big carp in it. I think there might have been a picture of Cuttail as well. And we thought, let's go and have a look. We ended up walking around. You familiar with Thiel Lagoon, which is a lake the other side. So it's
the other side of the M4.
Yeah, so I think we didn't have sat navs or iPhones and that, so we were following maps and that. We thought we were looking around Berfield. We were looking around a 350-acre
hole in the like a round hole.
Yeah,
in the
like a round.
Nothing like Berfield.
And I'm thinking,
really.
I really want to fish Berfield. This isn't what I pictured. I pictured something very, very different. And how are you going to catch anything from here? Anyway, long story short, we found the proper Berfield. And the first swim we walked onto was Speedboat Point. We parked up
In Flint or something.
In Flint, yeah. We might have jumped the gate because we didn't have I probably shouldn't say that, but we parked down Seals Farm Lane.
Yeah.
We ended up on Speedboat Point, and it's a pretty cool looking swim
Mega,
anyway.
yeah.
It's a mega swim, and it was like a bigger version of the Match Lake. You could see islands, peninsulas, and I just knew from that moment. I just thought, there's no coming back from this. This is what I want. This is definitely what I want, and we started there. And
Madness.
And yeah, I mean, talk about, I caught 3 the first year. And we were there every week, you know. Me and John were there every single week for a full 2 or 3 nights. I would have been using all my holiday as well, so we were burning through time over there, with not a lot to show for.
Well, no,
it,
but I mean, you say not a lot to show for it. The Common had done 3 or potentially 4 if you're going right back captures ever at that point.
Yeah. So at that time, Nigel had yet to catch it. So I met Nigel on the banks of Berfield. So I think it was 2002, 2003 I went there. That sounds crazy, done it 20 years. Lots gone on over there since. But yeah, so it had only been caught by Malcolm Tabb. It might have even been 2 years prior to us arriving.
Was it Danny Meyerhoff as well? Was that?
That was the capture before.
Yeah.
That was the one before out of Weedy Bay, I believe, £42.
And then Piers, and then
Piers
potentially
before that, and actually a chap called
like
Roy.
£27 or
Yeah,
something.
he's a Dinton angler now,
Is
actually. I believe he was the original captor. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, we didn't go there with aspirations of the Common as such. It was just we
as
knew
well,
it held
really.
a big carp. Yeah, just as well, because that would have got me nowhere. But we just knew it held carp. You know,
But you've caught them as well. You caught them from almost from the, like you caught them quick, Phil, right?
no.
Right.
I caught the first one quite late in the year. I caught a
But
24
by quick, I
pounder.
mean you caught from Berfield in your first go, if you like.
Yeah.
So there's a shot. Toby's just put a shot of this. Is
Yeah.
obviously later on, but
Yeah, so
still.
that's Speedboat Point.
This is the view that you described.
This is it. So where my rods are is where I walked onto that peninsula, and it's interesting. I don't remember it being. It looks quite sparse there, and the swim looks quite
It's not
warm.
now. Yeah.
It's not now.
It's
no.
equally worn, but there's more overhangs and stuff.
Yeah, sure.
Where your bed.
Yeah,
channel is.
I mean, I'm guessing that shrub in the
all
centre of the
grown
shot
up,
is quite high now. But yeah, so I stood where those rods are, and what you can't see in that, you're looking out on a big sort of
You're
runway.
looking down the boat channel, aren't you?
You are,
effectively, or
yeah.
whatever.
And yeah, I mean,
Great
that's an
view.
impressive view now, isn't it? I mean, if you could design a carp lake, it would look something like
I mean,
that.
you've gone from the Match Lake, which I think is a stunning lake as well. So much to admire about that lake, to what is probably the, you know, it's like everything you want in a carp lake scaled up Berfield, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the Match Lake on steroids, really, isn't it? It's the next level up. It's got the I mean, it's probably more like the nursery lake with the
Yes.
peninsulas and the little channels and stuff. Yeah, it's just a wicked lake.
At no point did you think I've bitten off more than I can chew here?
No, because I think that first period on that Brimpton Lake, I was quite used to blanking by that stage.
Yeah,
So I hadn't gone from lots of prolific. I've never really been a prolific carp angler. Even those pools I talked about, those park lakes, you wasn't catching every week. So I didn't really get to that stage where I hit a brick wall in terms of I'm used to catching week in, week out, and bang, I'm staring a 20-night blank there. That was the norm from the start. I'm always used to walking away more often than not without catching.
Do you think that ability to soak up punishment is what's allowed you to go on and have the sort of, you know, the
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, possibly. I have wondered that over the years because as you get older, you get a bit more pragmatic and you look at lakes in a different way and you think, okay, so I've got at max sort of 2 nights a week. The one I want to catch, if you use Dinton for example, water and fishing currently, there's a carp in there that I really wanted to catch. That's what that son of Triple Row.
Yeah.
So like an unbelievable looking carp. But I remember having a conversation with a friend saying, "There's 200 carp in that lake. I got to get past 199 carp to get that one. I got to try and do it in 2 nights a week. There's 20 anglers there most nights. How do you take that on, and how do you square that circle and think that it's doable?" But I'm a bit of a dreamer by nature. I kind of just think it'll be all right and it'll work out and I'll find a way. And there's a naivety to it. I realise that. And I've got, on paper you should look at it and go, stay well clear of that one, Phil. Go over there and you'll enjoy it more. But why not? You know, why not? If you're enjoying it and the buzz, almost the dream inside of it is as enjoyable, that daydreaming, you know, because you just let your mind wander. And
you've got to enjoy being at the lake as well, Phil, right? You've got to enjoy the other things about angling than the catching the carp if you're not going to catch that many in a year.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, well, it's preferable if you do. I mean, I can think of people that will sit at a lake and they don't seem overly happy to be there, but they will keep turning up and they will go and get the job done. I like to think I fall into that other group that can kind of smell the roses along the way. I'm happy just to be there, Rich, if I'm honest. You know, a busy day at work, a busy week at work, you get to the lake and it's like press and reset and get yourself back to neutral, and before you know it, everything just slows down to a nice, comfortable pace. And I'm not really fishing waters that take a lot out of me physically now, like a Berfield. You know, I think to try and take on something like that now, I'd have to get a lot fitter, and you're doing a lot more miles and stuff now. And back then, you know, no paths and good barrows and stuff. But yeah, what's not to love, mate? What's not to love being out in nature, surrounded by good people? As long as it's positive people, positive vibes, great surroundings, I'm happy to be there.
So, I mean, Berfield captures a lot of what you just described as the things that you go fishing for. So take us into that period. So early 2000s, the common is an elusive beast that no one knows a lot about at that stage. It's almost been caught by accident a few times. Sharpie's yet to be the first really to catch it by design, I guess. I'm not sure what Piers was seeing, but maybe, I'm sure Piers would say he did as well, which is great.
Yeah.
Love you, Piers. But take us back to that period when it was all new, and this was you emerging onto the big carp scene, really. How did you catch them, Phil? What were your kind of what were the things you were doing, your inspirations, sort of technically as well as?
Well, obviously Terry was a huge inspiration to us all, wasn't he? So, and in terms of technical, you know, landing on Berfield, that was the start of the chod rig from memory. I can remember using that rig very early on. I was really lucky that, and there's a bit of a theme here, certainly at Yateley as well. I was really lucky that there was a couple of anglers fishing Berfield, Alan Welch, John Holt, both great anglers, who have done it on some tough.
Did they have time for you? Were you able
yeah,
to
they were great
with
with me. They were great with me from the start. Whether it's because I was 23 maybe, so I looked totally out of place. Maybe they didn't see me as a threat, or maybe they just thought, fair play for trying and we'll help this lad out. But they were great with me from the start, both John and Alan, and they showed me things. But it was nice that they didn't put it on a plate. They would nudge me towards stuff, which I really liked. And as opposed to saying, get yourself round to Weedy Bay, there's loads of fish showing there, John would say something like, well, you know, Weedy Bay might be the one with these kind of conditions, but they do like it. And he would set it up for you, but he wouldn't put it on a plate for you. But technically, they were showing me, certainly the chod rig. I remember being shown that. I remember the 360 rig was shown to me for the first time by John Holt, with the big fox hook and the sort of stiff boom that, you know, very similar to today's spinner rigs, you know, same sort of mechanics and stuff. I remember that being shown to me over there very early on. Just the kind of rods you needed, the 20-pound Daiwa sensor mainline, all stuff that I wasn't using at the time. And
is it fair to say that, was it in folklore at that stage that common was a beast that needed some taming, you know, with this incredible, because I believe, did Alan lose it maybe? Like,
I think we all felt like we lost it,
yeah.
But whether we did or not, I mean, so to put it into context, those fish that are there now that are 45 and some of them are 50-pounders, yeah. They're colossal. They were upper 20s, scraper 30s. So they were powerful fish, but they were the kind of fish that if you were tackled up, you could probably feel like you'd deal with fairly easily. Berfield's quite demanding in the sense of there's a lot of obstructions both above water and underwater. It's difficult to get a good line lay over there. There's a lot of up and down. There's a lot of subsurface snags. There's a lot of weed. So you need to be tackled up. And I think probably early on, those guys, John and Alan, would have certainly been having that common in mind. I can't say I was walking on there thinking I need to be tooled up for that big common. I was just there to try and catch a carp, mate, you know, and was just enjoying running around a 96-acre maze where there was no rules. And if you wanted to nip out in a dinghy, you could, and there was no bailiffs and no bait rules. There was nothing. It was just, it was kind of just go and do your own thing. And, you know, you could light a fire. No one cared about stuff like that. Totally different to what it is today. So no, I wasn't walking on there with that mindset of it's all about that common. But, you know, you start to realise, don't you? You catch a fish and you start thinking, well, that was a bit hairy. Maybe next time around I'll fish with the clutch a bit tighter. And you learn as you go. You're learning on the job very much.
Yeah. So how did you break the lake's hold over its fish then? What were the key things to those first captures?
No different to now, just getting on the fish. When the fish moved into, I couldn't cast very far. I still can't now. But when they moved into those bays, which they did a lot back then, as the weather warmed up, they would get right in close in the bays. And it was just chod rigs, you know, casting out with chod rigs, little spread of boilies. I don't even think they spooked that easy because they weren't seeing the level of pressure that they are nowadays. I'm sure, I mean, I hear from friends that fish there that they don't get in those bays as much. I think a lot of it is bait boats at range. You know, those fish know that they're under duress an awful lot over there now. But back then it was just classic spring angling. Chod rigs, light leads, little scattering of boilies. And yeah, you'd get a few bites like that. The first one I had was from a tiny little swim. It was almost like a canal section of the lake. And I remember seeing a few fish going through. The water was gin clear in the spring. And I remember just seeing a couple of carp. I remember there was a high bank swim, and I remember getting to the top of this high bank swim and just happened to glance right. I think I'd been walking for a few hours, and it's like, oh, there's one. Oh, there's another. And there's a couple that scooted through. And I thought, well, they're in a canal. Like, even if I cast at the other end of the canal from where they are, I can't be more than 20 yards from them now. And it was just a couple of choddies flicked out. Yeah, and in the early hours, that first bite, and it was a pretty surreal feeling looking in and thinking, wow, you know, there's a carp in a 96-acre lake, and I finally got one. And it kind of went from there, yeah.
Were these like bright ones, or you know, what was your chod tactics? You trying to nick a bite, or
not bright ones at all. Actually, I was using. Am I allowed to talk bait companies and stuff? Yeah. So I was using DT baits.
Yeah.
The Pucker fish mix of oily chicken.
Oh, nice, a classic.
It's a classic. Yeah. So I was using that bait.
Smells like a roast dinner.
Smells lovely. And they had really good airball pop-ups at the time, and they were buoyant enough to hold a choddy up, and it was the original stiff riggers, the size 4.
Yeah, because this is early. But if you're talking
no Teflon hooks,
right?
No Teflon hooks or nothing like that. It was the original ESP stiff riggers. The bristle filament was out by that stage. Interesting. I can always remember the little bit of silicon section that you put above your lead. I was using Drennan feeder pole elastic, cut down, like 2-inch section of that. I can remember Al put me onto that and saying, oh, this lasts much better than silicon and it's a bit more of a cushion. So I was using that. 20-pound Daiwa sensor. So no bright ones. It was all food bait stuff. Freezer bait as well. We were using freezer bait then.
So you had, you know, you're doing all the things that one might associate with like a big carp approach, and yet, you know, you're quite fresh into your fishing at this point still, really. Yeah. Despite having done some time at Brimpton and the Match Lake.
Yeah, but if you think by then, I think Terry was so influential, and reading Big Carp magazine, and, you know, when that chod rig arrived on the scene as such, we all gravitated towards that, because I think we could all see this is the future, certainly in the short term now. I mean, that chod rig just, for a couple of years, it changed everything, didn't it? The way you could, I liken it, whereas there was a 10-acre lake where you used to be able to fish 2 acres of it, suddenly you could fish all 10 acres. There was no way you couldn't cast to, and you were fishing everywhere. And it coincided where if ever there was a water where I needed a rig like that, it was somewhere like Berfield, where you're trying to just move on to fish. I didn't carry a marker rod on Berfield. I can't ever recall using a marker rod on there. I might have done at some stage, but, you know, if I was fishing at any sort of range, I was going out in a boat and looking over the side. And
amazing.
Yeah.
So you've literally gone straight into the top. For me, that's straight to the top of the tree there. You're doing all that, you know, you're concentrating on finding fish. You're walking for hours. You're using a boat. These are all pretty sophisticated things that people tend to gravitate to, or tend to sort of build towards.
Yeah,
over there.
Possibly. Yeah,
you've got there quite quick, Phil. I think is what I'm saying.
Yeah, but you're a product of your environment, aren't you? So if you're in that environment, you're
sink or swim, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. Point, yeah, and when you're young and impressionable, you will gravitate to what the others are doing, as opposed to think, well, I'm going it my way, and I'm going to start, you know, using a marker float and I mean, Spoms weren't out; it was been a spod back then, but. Yeah, I mean, I kind of looked at Alan's approach, looked at John, looked at how those guys caught carp from there, and they were consistent, you know. And obviously Sharpie, I met Sharpie pretty quickly on, and obviously I was reading some of what Nige was writing about was his experiences on Berfield. So I'm actually reading and thinking, well,
in real time,
actually,
almost.
I'm seeing it,
Yeah.
but I'm reading about it, thinking, well, yeah, he's just caught last week. It's in his article. I'm definitely doing that next week. So, yeah, the acceleration process, that learning curve is steep back then. But how could it not be when you're, you know, I'm 22, 23. What do I know? I'm surrounded by those guys. I'm going to fall in with what they're doing.
Are you cautious about spending time asking them stuff? Are you in and out, or are they indulging you, and are you sitting for hours with these guys?
No, I would spend quite a bit of time with Alan, but it would usually, Alan would fish in the week, and then he would spend time with me at a weekend when I was fishing. So a lot of it was on his terms in my swim. I would pop into their swims, but I didn't overstay my welcome, and I think it would have been obvious pretty quickly, you know. That's quite often on there, they were doing a lot of edge fishing, so you're mindful of the fact. And back then as well, I can remember Alan would always have like camo netting over his shelter, and the shelter would be positioned in such a way that you almost couldn't get into the swim anyway. It was quite obvious, you know. So you just you did your thing, but yeah, great times.
Do you still speak to Alan? Because obviously,
I don't.
We're going to talk about it, but you did go on to have a bit of a working relationship down at some point.
Yeah,
but, you know, that's for a little bit down the line, Phil. But take us to the moment that you were able to catch what for many people would be, you know, fish that are right at the top of the tree, the sort of Berfield leanies. Talk to me about how that came about.
The first one I had was 3 up 5 down, which was, there was 2 fish, 3 up 5 down and the double belly or the double stomach. They were like the pinnacle behind the Berfield Common. They were the 2. They were probably at the time 55-year-old leanies. They just looked at, so that is that's the double stomach. It still blows me away now.
Yeah, it's a mega. The shape of it is really, really unusual.
Plus
the shoulder and the sloping head. Phil, can you describe that to the people who are listening?
What it looks like?
Yeah.
It's Jurassic, isn't it? I mean, it's where do you start? So I mean, I think one of the things, you can't see it as well in that shot, but one of the things that struck me when I caught both those fish was they've got these lips,
really distinctive.
They're really and it's almost like they've rolled, they're pouting. And I remember speaking to Alan about it, and he said, well, it must be all the years of moving stones and taking the naturals from the stones. And obviously there's a speedboat on Berfield, so you get a huge amount of wash. And I'm told that's really good for filtration. So things like zebra mussels and stuff really thrived in Berfield. And they probably spent years chomping away on them and wearing down their lips, bless them. But yeah, what an incredible fish.
Their mouths, I mean, you can't see it in that shot, like you say, but their mouths are almost on the front of their heads.
They are.
Really, really, I don't recall seeing other fish like that.
No, I caught some leanies from, actually I did, from a local water to me. There was 7 leanies in there, like the last of a dying breed. I managed to get the 2 good ones out of there. And that was the only other time, I should have bought that shot, but that was the only other time I've seen carp with that kind of lip formation. So unique. And
also unique is this double stomach thing, which is like a pinch in the middle by the by the pelvic fin.
Yeah.
It's like his body is pinched in. And it's got like I presume it's a she.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And if you look as well, just off its shoulder, that sort of, I mean, they've got that real 45-degree angle on their heads, and then there's like that drop on their backs. And,
yes. A bit higher up than perhaps you'd associate with a lot of fish as well. And the scales are ancient looking.
Yeah, I mean, that was, and you can kind of see like the purpley sort of hue to it and stuff.
And these were fish that were initially stocked into Farnham Flint, weren't they? And then
these, as I'm led to believe, they were originals in Farnham Flint, and the nature of that area, it floods quite a bit. They'd flooded into Berfield, so they weren't stocked by design into Berfield. I don't even know if Berfield would have been fished at the time. Maybe Farnham Flint was controlled by a club at the time. So they ended up in Flint first. They made it into that big lake next. I mean, Flint's a big water in itself. It's a bit of a mini Berfield, but there was 2. There was 3 up 5 down, and which was named because of its scale pattern. 3 really big scales, and then 5 below, obviously. That one's the double stomach. And the first one I caught was 3 up 5 down, and there was a swim called the Bailiff swim. I never saw anyone fish it bar by me and a couple of others. Certainly never saw any bailiffs over there, so I don't know why it got that name. But it was a swim called Bailiffs, and it's if you go back to that shot, actually, Tobe, the original scenic one, you can probably see the channel that I'm on about. The first scenic that you put up, there's a long peninsula. Yeah, so let me get my bearings here. So
not the first one, the second.
Not the first
peninsula.
one, the second one.
Yeah.
If you go all the way down that peninsula, you've got a swim called Bailiffs. So I think that whole section is around about 150, 170 yards from the tip there all the way down. But what you can't see is that next channel round, there's a big snag, and it was the hub of the lake. If you walked on, you used to be able to wade on, funnily enough, recently someone did actually do that, didn't they? But back then you didn't. You just walked on and went and looked, and it was like an aquarium. There was a hub there, a big snag, which was the hub of the lake. And they kept passing through that channel. And I remember thinking, how am I going to get a bait up there? You know, it was too sketchy to go and do a boat drop there at the time, because you were on the one bit of Berfield that was walked quite regularly. River anglers would head round it and stuff. So I kind of weighed that up and thought, that's maybe not the one. I need to try and do it legitimately. So in the end, I remember casting a marker float up that channel and wading on. I put a marker float on my rod, waded on with another marker rod and hooked up that line, got the lead core on. And I remember walking across that channel and then tiptoeing up to the next part of the island. And my intention was to just lower down on that snag. I remember the bank being really steep there, and I was trying to get as tight to the margins of the island as I could, and the bank was sort of falling away under my feet. It was well hairy. Anyway, long story short, I got a little pop up there, and I just had a bag of hemp, and I remember dropping some hemp until I couldn't see anything but the pop up. I just covered it with the hemp basically. It was a few handfuls, and I sort of tiptoed back, and I think I had a Buckley which I sort of threw out to try and correct the line angle a bit, and I waded all the way back to the swim and spent ages kind of correcting the 20-pound sensor to try and move it back through and get some sort of line angle. And the following morning I had a drop back. It was like the line had been cut. I picked up the rod, and what turned out to be 3 up 5 down, it swum back. It swum through that channel into the next channel, and it obviously thought, I'm heading for home, which is that snag at the time. And long story short, I managed to bring it all round, and there it was. I remember my mate John netted it, and I was at the back, and I was like, what one is it? What one? And I knew it's a good fish. And he was like, it's one of the originals, mate. And then he was like, there's like 3 big scales on one bit, and then there's another 5. And I was like, did you say 3 and 5? And then the penny dropped, and it was like mind blowing.
How were you aware of those fish, Phil? Like
Sharpie's writing.
Right.
Yeah, they
He'd
were in.
those,
they'd been caught. They were being spoken about by Alan and John as well.
Because it wasn't a lake that had been documented overly at that point.
No, not at all. I think Nigel might have been the first to write about it. It was just creeping in, wasn't it, with Joe's mag, and yeah, Nigel's writings was putting it on the map. But I mean, it wasn't busy by any means at that stage. I mean, the common had been caught at £45, which is still a big common today. But it was Nigel's capture that kind of really kick-started.
Were you seeing the local lads with people like Berfield Stew?
Yeah, Berfield Stew. He spoke to me after about 2 years.
Yeah.
But he's a lovely guy. But yeah, I remember him saying to me, in fact, the first trip I did was on speedboat. He come in on his push bike, was really cagey. And then he stopped, he'd stopped for the next time 2 years late. It was the first time I remember joking about it and saying it's taken 2 years to get a cup of tea out of you. He just said, look, I see a lot of people come and go, and I like to sort of, I mean, it's been his home for so many years, very precious, and rightly so. But yeah, Berfield Stew, he had a friend called Ian. There was a lad called Andy, another chap called Darren Day, who caught the common at 57, I believe, in 2007. A couple of tench anglers, and that was it, really. It was really quiet.
Do you remember what it felt like to hold 3 up 5 down, like a fish that was already very old?
No, I don't remember that bit of it. I can remember landing it. I can remember the buzz of that, and I can remember the excitement of waiting for the photos from Boots all week long, thinking, come on, when are these photos going to be ready? I do remember a real sense of pride. Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Is that the right one?
Where did you get that from, Toe?
That's good. I'm glad
Good
it's the
effort,
right one.
man. Yeah, good effort.
Were you counting those scales, Tobe, just before you popped
Yeah,
it up?
actually was. It's like
Yeah.
1, 2.
That's better than the photo you've got, Phil.
It is. I haven't even got a proper photo of that fish
But
now.
you can actually see in that one the mouth.
You
that
can.
turned
What
back
I
lip.
was trying to
Yeah.
say, yeah. I spawned out there. I think it was maybe 32. I think that fish did go all the way up to 38, maybe something like that. I think Oz had it at quite a big weight.
Good. Yeah, nice.
Amazing. So that was returned in the channel behind. There's kind of 2 channels there. I returned it there. Yeah, man.
What's
I
a
haven't
carp?
seen that shot for ages.
No, I seem to remember, like, did Terry have it look quite big and looking incredible, sort of
Real
late
pumped
autumn,
up.
like,
yeah, from the compound area. Yeah.
But these are rare fish, right? You know, the in our sort of time fishing, Phil, there've not been that many opportunities to fish for leanies that are documented and definitely known as such. There's a lot of maybes out there, but these were
sure.
the real deal, weren't they?
They were, yeah.
And I don't want to over egg that. You know, leanies are just a type of carp, right? But for some of us, they have a little bit of extra special, you know, appeal. Does that mean merit? Not necessarily, of course not. But you know, appeal wise, definitely. How much did these fish and the way they looked go on to shape what you wanted to fish for?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mixture. It's a mixture between the lake and the carp. So Berfield, I mean, at the time, if you can imagine, the biggest lake I'd fished was like the match lake of 12 acres. So to go to Berfield, which just has everything, and the space and freedom.
Have I got that right as well?
Yeah, that's
yeah,
it, mate.
yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So let me get my bearings. So where that pin is that says the blue pool, obviously you come across to the left there and you start to hit all those peninsulas.
That's the sort of area we're talking about. Isn't it?
Yeah, I did most of my fishing in those finger bays because I couldn't cast and didn't have a bait boat or anything. But
and back then, you know,
well, that's where they were.
Sun, they'd go. They'd be
once
in there.
once it warmed up, that's where they'd go. Yeah, they spent a lot of their time and down this end where it says the main lake. You've got these bays up this end. So in actual fact, the double belly I caught right at the bottom of this bay, Toby. If you move your cursor to the left there, yeah, this bay here is Weedy Bay, and there's a submerged car right where your cursor is now, in the margins. There was like a secret swim there. I caught that one out of there, and I remember it trying to swim into the car, which is quite funny. But it was a big shallow peninsula. They were either there or they were down the other end getting sun, obviously. But there was a lot of fish there that day.
And where were you seeing Alan and John fishing? Were you bumping into them regularly in terms of the way they're angling, the way you're angling?
Yeah, all over, to be fair. I mean, so the Rawlins bank there, to the left of that pin,
the main
where
lake
it's
pin,
the main lake pin, there was
That's it.
a couple of tickets there that Alan and John had. I never went there, and I got the impression that was their bit, that they'd scored some tickets off of a local lady who was prepared to sell them, because I think it was her land. Is it Carol Rawlins? Is it Rawlins?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I think she's since sold it. But
Has she? Right, okay. So they fished around there a little bit. I didn't go into that area, and never felt like I should, really. They were being so good to me that I kind of was conscious from an early start on there not to push it. I did a lot of time in the Finger Bays area. I quite liked Alsatian Bay. I caught a couple from there, and Weedy Bay. In fact, that little bay that you see, almost like the beach out of the film, that little secluded bay, that we used to call that Snaggy Bay. I believe that's called something else now, but there's a swim on the end there called Pindra Point. It's a good swim, and I did quite a lot of time on there as well.
just a cool lake to get lost in, Phil, as well.
It
I
is,
imagine, on a weekend.
Yeah. I mean, the first few, it would have probably taken me a good few weeks to get my bearings. And it sounds silly to say that, doesn't it, about a lake, but it was that split up. All those peninsulas, you'd start walking, several weeks in, you'd be walking down, I know, I've taken a wrong turn. I should have taken a left there and stuff. That was happening quite a bit early on.
And you weren't on the whole mountain bike thing like Sharpie came to do.
Nah, I nicked Nigel's bike quite a few times and so I can have a quick spin. But and that was the other thing as well. So I wasn't driving for a large part of that campaign.
Who's dropping you up there then, Phil?
So a friend of mine, John, was taking me. He was fishing the lake at the same time. We were both going together.
Squashed into
a Vauxhall Astra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All your kit as well.
Yeah, all our kit. And
That was tight.
And he would come and pick. And he was coming up from Bournemouth, so he would stop.
Oh, so he's done a fair old stretch
so he was on a
already.
right old stretch, and we'd sort of have to carefully. We got it down to fine art in the end, but we'd have to carefully pack my gear. And he was very good to me. And yeah, we'd both go up there, and there was always, you're trying to sound out on the way up, which end of the lake's he fancying, because if I fancy the finger bays and he's thinking he wants to be up this end, it's like, is it too much to say drop me off first down that end? And yeah, there was a bit of that. I do remember doing some monster barrow pushes. I remember moving from that bailiff swim, barrowing all the way out, all the way down to Seals Farm Lane, all the way around the back of Englefield, up down Seals Farm Lane, and then to go to Speedboat Point, and it nearly killed me, that did. Yeah, hard graft, but you kind of felt like you had to earn them over there.
Are you getting enough encouragement from the fish at this point?
You did see him a lot over there. Yeah, you did see him a lot. Interesting enough, I don't remember seeing them jump an awful lot. I just remember them being very visible in the bays, backs out, cruising around without a care in the world. And you'd hear them a lot at night as well. Certainly in those finger bays, you knew when you'd got it right. You'd hear them a lot. I do recall seeing that common jump as well.
Really?
That was an incredible sight. I saw that come out of the water once. No mistake in that.
I mean, building up to Sharpie's capture of the common, had it become more of a thing? Because obviously it wasn't to start with. Was it on your mind more as you developed into your own fishing on that lake?
What, of trying to target the common?
No, of it being there, of it being in the background, a presence.
Well, I actually saw
possible.
it prior to Nigel's capture. I'd seen it 2 or 3 times, always in the same area, the back of that dog leg, which is well documented as an area it used to go. And you could, I think there was some footage Tom had brought in a while ago of it cruising around. I can picture the trees even lent against when that footage was taken. But two days before Nige caught it, it was right around the back of that dog leg. And I remember it was in front of a swim we called the Tyre. It was a massive tyre. How it got there, because it would have been a hell of an effort to push it from, but there was this huge tyre there which gave the name its swim. And I remember saying to Nige, that common's around the back of the dog leg, I feel like I should set up on it, but equally I know I'll probably bounce it out. And Nige, being the shrewd operator that he is, talked me into setting up in that swim. Fair play to him, because he knew I would push it out and sort of bring it into play where he was, and that's what happened. So I set up in there, pushed the common out. It wanted to really be there sunbathing, but it got pushed into that shallow area. And yeah, Nige doesn't need many opportunities to close the deal, does he? And he got it.
What was that like? Did he rank? You had mobiles presumably, but then didn't you? I guess. Or did he come and get you?
No, I did get a phone call. So I was, by now I'd moved swims after the first night. Once I realised I'd pushed the common out, and I'd set up in the 30 swim, and I'd seen.
So you're opposite him almost.
I'm slightly, Nige is at kind of 11 o'clock to me. Alan Welch is about 150 yards down the bank in the first shallow swim, and he's bang opposite Nige now. So the pair of them are in pole position for the 2 shallow swims. I'm kind of, I'm a little bit up the bank, but still in the mix, but not quite where you need to be. They're on it, those 2. And I can remember John ringing me. By this stage, I'd already photographed that Nige he'd caught the double stomach and the classic on consecutive mornings, and I'd been round and done those photos. So it was brewing up for Nige anyway. He was starting to get those bigger females. They were right on the cusp of spawning. And I just remember getting a phone call and John saying, wind your rods in, geezer, he's had it. And I was like, who has? He said, Nige. And I thought it was a wind-up. I remember walking down the bank to Alan's swim. His rods were wound in, thinking, oh my word, this is really happening. And it was quite nice because I had a little bit of time to walk around the back of those shallows. And yeah, I can remember Nige kind of doing figure of 8s in the swim. Alan was on the phone, and my mate John was there. I think he was making a cup of tea. There was the 4 of us, and there was an original Nashi monster carp sack. I'll never forget it. Nige had a stainless bank stick that was bent over in the ground, where the carp was kind of powering away in the sack. And yeah, it was a mind-blowing sight when we got it out.
Very few of you there as well to see that what was about to shake the big carp scene. You know, the capture of that.
Well, I never thought it would. I mean, you don't really visualise seeing it when you go over there, do you? Because why would you? It's been caught like 3 or 4 times in forever. But I always thought, what would you do if you did catch it? Because quite often you've got no one around you. How would you deal with that? And we did start to sort of, you know, you'd say to your mate, what would you do if you caught it over there? And he's like, well, you'd have to carry it round to that, because what you can't see as well is so much of Berfield is terrible for photographing fish, particularly in those finger bays. It's almost jungle stuff, you know. And I think Malcolm's shot was a flash shot right at the back of that dog leg, and you can see how enclosed and almost claustrophobic it is. But yeah, there wasn't a big crowd there. Although incidentally, I can remember we were saying to Nigel, where do you want to photograph it? And Nigel said, well, let's have a look round here. And we actually went round the back of the blue pool.
Yes.
Which is like...
on the grass.
Which is on the grass there.
It looked
and
like...
it was flat.
Could have been anywhere, couldn't it?
Yeah, it looked like it could be anywhere. And I remember we went round there and Nigel said, yeah, well, let's do it here. So there it is. Wow. Yeah.
I mean, it looks a different carp to the one that we see today now.
Yeah.
Bizarrely, it looks shorter, fatter there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's grown since, no doubt.
Unbelievable, yeah. I mean, so Tom's shot up there, you can see the length change there, can't you? Yeah. Obviously, Scott's capture down there. It almost seems to...
I mean, Scott's capture, who knows? Simon Scott's at the bottom there as well, the most most recent. For me, it's a different carp to Ron Sharpie caught.
Yeah, it is.
Its head seems longer, bigger. Could just be the angle of the shots. But do you remember any kind of pressure in terms of you manning the cameras?
Yeah, I was terrified because Nige had 2 cameras from memory. I think he had a silver Canon, which was a digital camera. It was the first digital camera. I'd never held a digital camera before. And he had an old EOS with slide filming. But Al had a camcorder at the time. So I think pretty quickly it had been decided that Al was going to shoot some video, which there is some footage actually, because they did a DVD, didn't they? And the footage is in that DVD. Yeah. That's right. It's coming back to me now. So it had been decided Al was going to do the video camera. And because I'd shot the 2 previous captures of Double Stomach and the Classic, Nice just kind of gave me the camera. I can remember as well, which was, I did feel the pressure. I can remember... because obviously you could see the image for the first time. And I can remember Nige kind of holding this. I mean, Nige is a little guy, I'm sure he won't mind me saying. He picked this carp up and it just dwarfed. I can remember thinking, my God, that almost looks so out of proportion because you just got little Nige behind this massive common carp. I'd never seen a common that size. And I can remember taking a few pictures and I could see how blurry they were on the screen.
Oh, no.
Where I was shaking. And Nige is like, how are they looking, mate? Like, doing his best to balance 50 odd pound of common. I'm saying, they're looking great, mate. They're looking great. And I'm thinking, they're not looking great at all. They're looking awful. But luckily, I calmed down. We got a few. Yeah, we shot a few.
Mad. I mean, what's springing into my mind when you talked about walking around the back of the shallows is you're entering a swim with 2 guys, Alan and Nigel, who have frankly set aside whatever they were doing in life at that point to fish for that carp. You weren't at that point yet. No. These guys were deep.
Yeah, they were. They were a few years.
And Alan is obviously, presumably, chuffed for Nige putting a brave face on it, but has seen his obsession be caught by someone else. And Nige has drawn a line under the most.
Yeah, but it didn't feel like that because I think we were. So I remember Al saying to Nige, "Can I ring Stu as well?" Because I think we were all aware of what that moment was. We were all buzzing just to be there and see it, you know. So I think Alan you're right. Look, I'm sure when the dust settled that night, he probably thought, "Wow, I was close. That was a real close chance." But in the moment, we were just buzzing, man. We were so blown away by this fish, and if you can imagine how it exploded after it. I mean, that shot that Toby just put up. I mean, that's got to be one of the most published carp shots of the modern kind of era. I mean, it was mega news. It was mega news. And to be a part of it was just a privilege, yeah.
I still think that that the Berfield Common represents, and it's only a personal opinion, it represents probably the only carp that gets the whole scene talking now, because it's so diluted. Big carp get caught every day, but that's the only one. Even if it might only be for that day, everyone talks about it still.
Yeah, you still get the mess. I mean, my brother's into fishing, but nowhere near as regularly as me. He'll text me when the Berfield Common's been out.
Really?
Say, have you heard the Berfield Common's been out today? Yeah, I remember the last couple of captures. He'll text me, and it's like if it filters down to Paul's level, who by his own admission's quite casual with it.
Yeah,
it shows you how big it is. Yeah.
Well, I'd not long started working in fishing, and we ran it on the cover, and I think Ology ran it on the cover as well. It was probably in hindsight a bit cheeky that we did it. But I think maybe they had it. Nige made sure they had it first, and then whoever secured the shots at the time, we ran it the next month maybe, and it was all sort of tied in with a bit of a story around that we ran as the mag. And I think Nige, like you say, it went from being a water where very little was ever published to being established as probably the.
Well, I think it was Nige's moment, wasn't it? Because obviously. Terry and Nige, such close friends, their angling had followed similar paths, but I think Berfield was the time where, I forget where Terry would have been fishing. But
everywhere, wasn't it? And Nige had to set all that aside.
And Nige had gone into something completely different, but I think that was Nige's moment where, I'm not saying he was in Terry's shadow, but there was probably an element of that just by who Terry was, but that was Nige's moment that put him on the map as,
absolutely,
I can go and do this, and rightly so. Great
I mean, it's
angler.
been caught by design since, but not that many times.
Not that many times. And you think of the rod hours and the anglers that are over there now, and the stamp of angling that goes on, and the bait boats and everything that's opened that lake up. Yeah, it's still up there, isn't it?
You never feel like going back and square, to use your analogy, squaring that circle? No, because I've caught a lot of the big fish in there now. I caught a lot of them when they were small stockies, so there'd be a lot of fish to repeat on. You're really trying to catch one carp in my mind then, for me to try and catch one, and it be that one. And I kind of treasure those memories that I have. So to go... As a wild lake,
and it's everything moves in time, doesn't it? But to go back now, I've never really felt like I want to... No, I haven't.
Why did your fishing stop on there?
I got a car park ticket.
Right. And where is that in relation to Sharpie's capture of the Common? So you've seen the Common, 2006.
Yeah, and 2007, the Yateley car park ticket come up. And I remember talking to Alan and John and saying, I've seen the Common now. I feel like I should stay. And they both sort of said to me, that egg time has been turned on the car park. It's kind of now or never. I went for it. I thought, why not? Which was crazy, really, because my biggest carp I'd never caught a 40-pounder. I caught a couple of 30-pounders out of Berfield, and suddenly you're arriving at a lake that's only got 40-pounders in, pretty much, and you're kind of
in the mix with, the great and good of the southern carp scene. And some of the northern carp scene as well.
Absolutely.
It was nationally important, wasn't it, at the time?
But I think what was interesting is that I think when I got there, obviously there was mega news. I think Nigel had a connection to Yateley anyway. And I think when I first arrived, some of the regulars from the car park knew of me as, this is the guy that photographed the Common for Nige, and this is the guy who's fished over Berfield. So they were great with me.
Did it give you a little bit of credibility turning up on that lake?
Probably, yeah, probably.
Because it was known as a fairly intimidating environment for someone fresh to go onto. Maybe you didn't quite have that same...
Yeah, maybe. I mean, you did that circuit, didn't you? You went and fished the match slate, then you progressed to the cops, you went over the road, so to speak.
Which you didn't do. You didn't.
No, I did a bit on the match. I would have loved to have had a go on the cops, but sadly it all came to an end before I had a chance. But I really, really love that lake. Another couple of guys, Steve Pagulatos, Rick Harrison, they were absolutely fantastic with me right from the start.
Which really flies in the face of this idea that everyone's going to be staring at you trying to get around a float, and
it's nothing like that.
No,
I felt there was, in fact, the year that I started on there was a couple of young lads. So Scotty Kay had been on there the year before and was young at the time. James Davies, who'd obviously gone and caught them out of Raysbury. So I think there was a group of Gaz was the year. Was Gaz the first year? Yeah, Gaz was the first year that I was there. So there was a group of us all in our early 20s. And I had the credibility, I guess, from the Berfield stuff. Obviously, Gaz was Gaz, and people like James Davies and Scotty Kay, they'd gone and done it on waters like Raysbury and Pingeon and things like that. So I kind of lucked in that I was joining with an age group that already had, had a bit of credibility there anyway. But no, great guys over Yateley. Never had any issues there at all. Always was made to feel welcome, and right from the off, it felt like home.
It presumably, which is crazy really, because you've come off a 96-acre lake where you're not seeing anyone to a lake where you're looking across at someone all the time.
Yeah.
But it still felt like home. Socially, is that? Or fishing-wise?
Well, the car park lake, Yateley in itself is a mega-looking place anyway. You can feel the magic under those trees. You turn up in that complex, it's silver birches everywhere, holly bushes. It just has a feel to it, Yateley does. And yeah, I just loved every minute of it from the off. And you have to remember as well, those finger bays on Berfield, when you're set up in them, they feel like little mini Yateley lakes in themselves. You're not sat looking over massive vistas and stuff like that, like you would be on some of the other ends of Berfield. So no, I clicked with it straight away. Didn't catch anything the first year, but
what did you see? Who was doing the angling? Who? Because there's always, the finger always points at someone on the car park lake any given year, doesn't it? Who were the guys that were making the moves at the time?
That's a good question. So the first year on there, Gaz caught the dustbin pretty quickly.
Spodding, wasn't it, as well?
Yeah. And then we didn't see him all summer. So he got the dustbin early. Scotty Kay, I think that was his second season. So he caught. So it was Scotty Kay and Alex West were kind of on the Heather hunt. I saw Heather that first year when Alex caught her. I can't remember. There wasn't. I don't remember there being a dominant angler like Daryl or Darren Miles or Terry in the day. Someone like that. It was being spread out a little bit, which might have helped. Might have helped me that I was going on a time when there wasn't one particular angler carving it up.
And what you saw in terms of technical ability from these guys is presumably a slightly different thing to what you need. What was needed at Berfield.
Yeah. Well, I got the nickname Big Hook very early on because I had these huge. Did the wide gape come in a size 2? If it come in a size, I was using the biggest size you could use. If it was in a 2, that's what I had. If not, it was certainly a 4. And back then, we use size 4s all the time now. They're probably the most common size, aren't they? But back then, it was all 8s and 6s. Some of the lads used 10s. Like these tiny little Gamakatsu hooks and stuff. I just remember thinking £50. No, not using any of that. And Alan had kind of said, look, go and give this, take your Berfield tactics to there because it's so radically different that I think it might be the one, mate.
Alan had caught Yateley.
Alan he'd caught Heather. Yeah, he'd been and done it already. I don't know if it was on those tactics, but it made sense. So that first year, I was using really big barrel-shaped hook baits when everyone else was bit fishing with nuts and stuff. I was using massive size 2 or 4 wide gapes, big shrink tube kickers, just completely away from the norm.
So hang on, who was it actually christened you Big Hook then?
Lewis. It would have been Lewis Reed.
It was.
It's a Yateley nickname. It's not the best one, but I'm kind of, it's nice to have one in some ways.
Have you managed to shed it at all or not?
Yeah, I have, but funnily enough, every time, I don't hear from Lewis a lot or bump into him very much, but I might sort of see him once at a show or something. He's always shout, Big Hook. So, I always get it from him, which is kind of keeps it fresh in the memory, so to speak.
Did you persevere with the Big Hooks though on there?
No, I didn't. So the first year, in hindsight, if I had my time again, I would have stuck to the main spots. I don't think technically I still feel like that approach would have worked. A spread oily tactic, it wasn't drastically different from what Daryl had done on there. I know Daryl had used his soft hook lengths and the original wide gapes in a smaller size. But I think in my mind, I thought, well, what's the point in putting it on the same spot that he's just blank for 2 nights and the guy before him was just blank? That just seemed to me, I couldn't really make any sense out of that. So I was like, well, just put it in almost the bits off the spots or try and find new areas and stuff. But to be honest, the car park was funny. It's quite unique in that it's super weedy, and you would cast around in a swim and it'd be weed, crack, machine gun gravel. And it's like, well, that's one of the spots. And they always lined up with dips in the trees and stuff like that. And I think I was too bloody minded in staying off those main areas. Now, the following year when I did have some success, I changed two things. I did change the rigs, but I also changed the fact that I went onto those main spots, and it all come together pretty quickly then in terms of kind of Yateley levels, I guess. Still quite a lot of nights, but yeah, I mean, some of the people on that car park, you have to remember there was guys 7, 8, 9, 10 years in on that place. And I mean, I was only there for a year and a half, really. So it ended quicker than I probably wanted it to end. But yeah, you take what you're given over there, don't you?
Absolutely. What were the key moments in that kind of progression towards your first bite?
Well, I come really close. I drew you when they start the season. I think from memory, it's like a month before the start. You drew your swim. You got to pick your swim. You come out of a draw and then you pick your swim, and then you could bait it leading up to the start. So that's cool, you know. And a lot of people would take advantage of that. I got the End Secret, which was the swim that Rick Harrison had caught Arthur from the year before. So I was buzzed about that, and there was a lot of fish in the close season that were evident in that area, and Rick was kind of giving me the nod. Oh, you've done well there, son. You know, that's a good zone and stuff like that. Fair play. And it was by no means a popular swim on that lake. So I felt like I got off to a good start. Had a really good chance at the dustbin very, very early on. I can remember I had a bait positioned on a little sandy sort of hump, fairly close in. Yateley's got some great climbing trees, although I think at that stage you weren't strictly supposed to be up them, but Ben was 30 foot up a tree, looking straight down. I mean, I could see the dustbin from ground level. I don't know what it looked like for Ben. And I had a hook bait positioned out there, and Ben said, oh, any second now, you know, it's tails up. And I was a wreck, you know, thinking the carp I've read about's 40 yards over there, about to pick up my hook bait. So I had a good chance of that, and it didn't happen. And yeah, it was a slow process. To begin with, I just couldn't get near them. That was the hardest part about it, that they were localised in a couple of areas where the main weed beds were, and I just couldn't get into those swims at the right time. I still now even think that in that 18 months that I was there was possibly certainly no more than a handful of occasions where I felt absolutely like there's nowhere else I'd rather be. If it's happening in my swim tonight. And I caught on 2 of those occasions. So that's not bad, is it? You know, There was a lot of time you knew you were camping. You knew this is going to just be one of those weekends where I'm going to kick back, enjoy the atmosphere of Yateley, and really I need to be over there. And you know, that's big carp fishing, isn't it? It's particularly on low stock lakes.
And was there a different crew at the weekends, Phil? Were you turning up at the, you know, just before a certain set of faces who weren't then in the week? Or
so Gaz did a Wednesday, Thursday night. So that was the link, if you like, one of my mates who fished in the week. But we did a work night in the week, so we were up there anyway. I mean, it felt like I was there every night. I probably wasn't there every single night. It felt like I was there every single night. But there was a changeover. There was the midweek anglers, and then there was the group that fished the weekends. But we were already trying to get a night in. So you go, is it better to start the Thursday, Friday, or fish the Friday, Saturday? And sometimes you could fish. I would have the Friday off work. So if I'd get there on the Thursday and think, wow, I can get in that swim, you'd start your session then, and you just accept that you weren't fishing Saturday night. You'd still crash over there, and you'd never go home early. But yeah, it was always around that. There was a changeover. There was the midweek crew, there was the weekend crew, but it's been mixed up slightly by the fact that everyone was trying to squeeze as much time in as they could, and they wanted to do their work night as well.
Now, you're there most nights, you're fishing the weekends. There ain't a lot of room for much else in your life at that point.
There wasn't much else.
No. And was that conscious, or was that just something you forgot about, put on the back burner?
Well, that whole period from starting to fish that whole sort of the first 2 proper lakes, if you like, Berfield, and a bit of the Match Lake and the Yateley car park, I just didn't have any other interests really. All I wanted to do was be at the lake and go carp fishing. I was single. I was living at home. I had a very, very average job that I didn't really need to focus on. So I could just totally immerse myself in it.
Are you thinking carp all day then?
Yeah, literally. I mean, you're counting down the hours at work, and then I wasn't even changing. I would just, quite often I would arrive at the lake in my work clothes for the evening. And I remember there's a shot of me, I think there's me, Gaz, James, and I've still got the work shirt on, where I've literally gone straight from work to the lake and we've had a barbecue. I think Gaz might have had Pearly from I can't remember from memory, but yeah, just as much time as you can get there. It was all about, but you have to remember with Yateley as well, is that it felt like going to the pub. Or
yeah, but you've got your social scene there.
The social scene is there. You're surrounded by all your mates. It's a right good laugh. There's beers. There's good food. It's a great time to be there anyway.
Because presumably now you're at the same company you were at then. What did they think about what you were doing then? And presumably you're part of the furniture there now. They all accept that you're slightly mad, or
well, no, because my job back then. So I was a welder for 10 years. So my day was going into a welding bay at 8 o'clock in the morning, plugging in my iPod, listening to 8 hours of tunes, welding away, and then going again. So it's quite a solitary existence anyway, the life of a welder. So it actually aligns quite nicely with carp fishing. Nowadays, as a manager running multiple departments there, and lots of staff reporting into you can't switch it off. That I have to focus from the moment I'm there. So I've got better at that, about being able to turn off the kind of carp stuff in my mind. So I'm not on my phone all day texting and stuff like that. I can't. So there's quite a nice clean break. I don't tend to fish in the week, overnights and stuff. My fishing starts usually on a Thursday night now. Spring and autumn, I don't usually work a Friday. I save my holiday, and I'll, so where we are, 5th of October, so I'm smack bang in the, I haven't worked a Friday for about 8 weeks. It's been Thursday, Friday nights, Thursday, Friday, Saturdays, if I can get away with it.
And the missus is good with that?
Good as gold. Yeah. No, she's really supportive, to be fair. And I think because she's known me for about 15 we've been together for, I should know this really, you might have to cut this.
Yeah, I was going to say it's on camera, mate.
We've been together 10 years, closing in on 10 years, but we'd known each other prior to that. So I was always within our social circle of friends, Phil's always off fishing. Yeah. I think she knew what she was letting herself in for.
Yes.
But no, it works fine. There's no dramas.
So, but back then, obviously free and single, you were at the lake. And how often did your work overnighters, or your work visits, week visits, result in information that you could then use at the weekend? Presumably hardly ever, because you can't get on them.
Yeah, but I don't even think I was. I mean, the overnighters was just a case of being. I kind of knew at Yateley in the end that if you're doing the nights and you're fishing the same spots as everyone else, everyone's fishing in a very similar way. So you're all going to get similar results because no one's really mixing it up. So I was kind of aware from the start that I'm probably here for the long haul now. I tried what I tried the first year. I thought that was either I'd ride off into the sunset, having done what Darryl done on there, and thought, there you go. You just needed to be a bit different and be brave with it. Once that didn't happen, and I almost fell into the norm, I hadn't really planned beyond finishing on. I just assumed I'll be here for years, and that's that. So in some ways, the pressure's off you then. It's almost like you've decided, well, this is going to take years. It's the norm at Yateley for it to take years. If you blank a season on there, it means, there were guys on 3 or 4 year blanks. Imagine that, like 3 or 4 years going to the same lake, just not had a carp. So I didn't feel that way. No, I didn't feel that way. I just wanted to be there. If I went and blanked on a Tuesday or Wednesday night, it didn't mean anything. And come the Thursday, Friday, or if I'd have done a Wednesday, I'd have only been able to fish a Friday, Saturday. Every time was different anyway. You were never really sure what you were going to get. There was none of this, Phil's been doing a bit of time in that swim, so we'll leave it. It didn't work like that over there. There was a continual turnover of anglers. I think 16 swims from memory. Pretty much all of them would have been fished for a minimum of 2 or 3 nights every single week by several guys. So you never really went and did the work night thinking you might. Nowadays, great, you go do your work night, set it up for the session that's coming at the end of the week. It didn't work like that over there then. No, it was, every trip was a single trip. It didn't really feel like stuff was leading on.
No, and also presumably during that time, you know where the fish are because, mate, he's in there and he's maybe had one, or they're certainly in front of him. And if you can't get into that swim, or do you have to be resilient to the fact that you either need a miracle, i.e. they move out and suddenly move on to you, or you're blank in the weekend?
Well, what was interesting about the car park is that nobody seemed to want to hide where the fish were. So nowadays, everyone's a fairly, you walk into any good mate, nah, dead. And, they could have half the lake in front of them, but they never really divulged that. But on the car park lake, you'd get to one of the first swims, anything happening. No, they're all in front of Bill in the dugout. So you knew where they were. Oh, okay, anything around? No, nothing, mate. So that's why I'm over here. I should be. Okay, fair enough. So you knew where they were every single week when you turn. Yeah, so
that's the other side of the road, Tobe. So that's the match lake we're looking at there, Phil, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, there we are. Yeah. So
it's the kind of nondescript one.
Yeah.
Up left there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, so
that's 9 acres of fairly demanding low stock fishing, isn't it? There,
it's tough.
Yeah,
it's tough. It's tough for so many reasons.
For reference, this one here. Yes.
Yeah, that one there, Tobe. Yeah. So, it's tough for so many reasons. It's obviously low stock of carp, but it's not a big lake, So when you think of like Berfield, you use that comparison earlier, 96 acres. The big thing over there, it is a cliche, isn't it? You've got to find them, and you might work out where they are at the end of a 3-night trip on Berfield. Whereas Yateley Car Park Lake, you could know within 3 minutes of being on that venue where you speak to the first guy, they're over there. Okay, so that's where they are. So there was never a location thing. I think just you can never undo that pressure. They've been under pressure for years and years, acutely aware of their environment. There is only 7 or it would have been 9 mirrors. Lots of bait going in, no real competition for food. And huge amounts of natural in the weed.
With the, obviously at the very start you mentioned that, having that clocking off early at work gives you the drop on the weekends. Was that not something you were able to leverage to get into the going swim?
There was a guy there called Nick Jones. Remember, he had the nickname Turkin Stick Nick, and I'd worked out, it was funny because I'd worked out that if I loaded my car, everyone arrived at exactly the same time. Presumably everyone had worked out their absolute earliest they could get to the pit. But I worked out within a couple of weeks, if I loaded my car in the morning and took my cart clothes with me, I could beat Nick.
Yeah.
And pretty quickly, I remember him confronting me in the car park and saying, "You've changed your working hours, or you've done something different. You're here every week now in front of me." But by 10 minutes, literally.
But obviously he didn't know. He
didn't realise at the time. Yeah. And all of a sudden it's like, how come Phil's here 10 minutes before me? The first 5 weeks, I was 10 minutes before him. And anyway, I laughed about it and said, well, look, I'm leaving straight from work now, mate. And we had a laugh about it. But that was the kind of thing you had to pull out every single thing you could to get an advantage, because you were so disadvantaged that everything like that counted.
But presumably beating Nick to the lake by 10 minutes isn't going to actually boil down to many chances in a year, because there's still other anglers in the mix, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's hard to describe, Rich. It's a very unique place. It's probably the most enjoyable 18 months angling, but at the same time, I said this to Gaz ages ago, I wouldn't want to do it again. Like, it takes a lot from you, and it's a funny way of carp fishing, but it's incredible. The prizes are just incredible.
You say funny, is that purely because you're fishing in the same, you're going back into those spots every time?
It feels a little bit robotic in that you're absolutely right. So you're fishing the same swims, the same spots. You're almost doing it all on autopilot every single week, and then you're winding in 24 hours, 40 hours later, and there is this sense of kind of Groundhog Day of what I'm actually doing, and really, am I achieving much here? And I think it's only offset by the social scene. I think if it didn't have that social scene, we'd have all gone mad. But that was the balance to what you were trying to do. Because if you look at it really, if you look at Arthur, for instance, that carp would be caught once a year, once every 18 months. Some years it skipped. What are the chances of you being the guy to catch it when there's 30, 40 guys regularly fishing that lake? You're almost trying to you're setting yourself up for failure every single week. So the fact that the social scene was as it was such good fun to be there. kind of made you forget what you were there for.
Did anyone try new stuff? I mean, obviously, were you there for the kind of the Weeder-Noster sort of time of, when people tried to fish on the weed?
That I can recall Scotty K catching the baby orange that way. That was it Terry that used that first over there? Mate. I think it might have been. I think Terry on Trumptons from memory might have done that. Scotty K was on that quickly, obviously, very technically proficient Scott and me, and he was on that quickly. I remember him catching the baby orange like that. I think Gaz might have caught one on that setup as well. I don't recall using it myself. There wasn't a lot of drastic stuff being done on there. No, it was all quite regimented. It was bait boats. It was small particle traps. It was tiger nut hook baits. There was a real fad for these Kamazan hooks at the time. B775.
They're the shrimp pattern. You mean the thick river hooks, don't you? The like
really beaked
ones.
Yeah. Everyone thought that they were the kryptonite.
With a bit of like supple braid and
real supple braid.
Yeah.
Rubbish rig, really. Like it's got nothing going for it. But I don't know why we thought
inline lead.
I'd like to use a spinner on there. Put it that way.
Right.
Or some of the rigs we use now.
So do you think the social scene, in a sense, pacified people's need to try something? Like they were almost anaesthetised to the process.
I think a lot of people rocked up at Yateley with dreams of being Terry or Daryl, and I think very quickly, once the blanks racked up, you were having such a good time anyway, it didn't matter. And it was like, well, okay, this is almost not carp fishing now, but so what? We're having such good fun. We were super tight. The group of anglers fishing there, I mean, they're all my friends now. I keep in touch with a lot of them, speak to them on a weekly basis. Even though some of us have never fished another lake again, we still keep in contact. So what was that? It was 2000. That's a long, long time ago. I just think it was a great time, mate. We were young lads having on one of the best waters, fishing for the country's best.
That you caught the very end of the very best period as well, didn't you?
I was very lucky, yeah.
So talk to me about the intensity of those 2 or 3 occasions when the fish turned up.
Well,
and how you prepped for that as well.
So I had that great opportunity at the dustbin, and I watched Arthur come in and literally barge it off the spot, and I thought, how is that possible? And they both exited the swim quickly, and I never see them come back again. And that had taken, on that occasion, I had been able to slip bait in for a couple of weeks, so that was a major chance gone, and that really wounded me, because I remember thinking, Christ, I ain't going to get a chance where I can set it up over a period of weeks like that. So that chance went. Like I say, the first year was very challenging. I was kind of trying to do something radically different, but I could feel time slipping away. Once you start racking up some serious 20, 30, 40 night blanks, you kind of feel like I think I'm moving away from success here, not towards it. And obviously, that's being offset by everyone else is doing that tiger nut, braided hook length, inline lead thing. So when a carp does get caught, which is not very often, you're watching them unhook it with a little braided hook length, and you're walking back to your swim with your massive size 2 Korda hook thinking, yeah, why did I think I was going to go down this road again? So you are questioning a lot of stuff. So the first year was almost, I decided at the second year, I went back to Berfield in the spring, and I caught the double stomach fairly quickly, which was like a real, I described it in a piece I did years ago, it was a real breath of fresh air, because I'd gone from maybe 70, 80 nights of blanking. Pretty quickly I'd gone back to Burfield, which was still well spicy in itself, and caught one of the really nice big leanies. So it's like, right, I can still do this, but I obviously need to do something drastically different back at Yateley. Second year I went back there, I'd made the decision that I was going to fish those main spots. I was a bit wiser to when you needed to be in at what swims at what time. I used to take quite a lot of notes and stuff. I'd have a fishing diary, write everything down every trip, record everything like that. Who's where, what the wind's doing, pressures, stuff like that. So I had a lot of notes to look at that, big southwesterlies, they turned up there. When it was high pressure northerlies, they were over there. When those swims were bombed out, they tended to push there. So I had a lot of that to work with. And I was just a year down the line. So pretty quickly, I was trying to get into those main players, swims like Des's, Trumptons, the Curly. Those were sort of real successful summer swims. And yeah, so the first capture was heather. And ironically, I had a birthday meal to go to on the Friday. I knew I was going to arrive at the lake late, and I turned up. I had all my gear in. I left the. Yeah, there she is. Sorry, I'll keep sidetracked when I see that picture.
What a way!
I haven't looked at that shot for all these shots. I haven't looked at for ages.
Nice to see him on the big screen. Apologies to those listening, but
yeah, for sure.
Maybe you know what Heather looks like.
Yeah,
but
so that capture.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. So that capture. I turned up at the late on the Friday. I walked into the gate swim. There was a chap called Hemp Boy. That is a good Yateley nickname, isn't it, Hemp Boy? It's better than mine. And he said, everyone's got down today. There's been a complete turnover on the lake. He said, it's busy, mate, but everyone got down today. So straight away I thought, well, I won't fish tonight. I'd already booked the Monday morning off work in anticipation that I probably wouldn't be starting fishing until the Saturday, and I was going to fish Saturday, Sunday. So I booked that Monday off. So I knew the first night was going to be pretty much a write-off, but I had basically the pick of swims for the Sunday night, which is the first time it was the first Sunday night I'd ever fished on the lake.
So you were able to, just to clarify, you knew they're all going.
Yep.
Does that mean you can slip a bucket in behind?
Yes, so I can book an area. Yeah. And I wanted Des's, which there was a big weed bed on the surface at the time. The fish were using it. It become the hub of the lake. They were spending a lot of time there. And I knew that was the place to catch heather. I was sure she was going to come from there next. And there was a guy in there called Listen Here, Mate, another Yateley nickname. And I'd booked it off of him. I think I remember crashing out in Waiting Man's the first night. I didn't put any rods out, obviously. And I remember the next day, I was desperate to get in there the following morning. And he was timed off at something like midday, and he made me wait until like the last... I mean, the fish were out there. They were evident. I don't blame him. But I'm like, I've got my gear in the swim, and I'm like constantly looking at my watch and trying to hint as much as I can. And yeah, he made me wait until the last minute. So he's skipped off. Interestingly enough, I remember Sharpie had come down to see me, and he was sat in the swim, him and Tattoo Andy, and we were just chilling out and just, you know, having a laugh and stuff. And they left early evening, and looking back, I think I must have known, because I remember I was using X-Line at the time, which used to, it didn't sit well on the reels. I remember taking a load of that off, and I had these big Infinity bait runner that could hold like 1,000 yards of line or whatever. I remember taking loads and loads of it off until I hit some brand new X-Line. I cut all of that off, which in reality was only like 60 yards. I remember tying a brand new lead core leader and stuff like that. Everything was kind of double checked. I took it out to this spot, which was about, from memory, sort of 70 yards out, and got the rod into position. I remember saying to Sharpie before we left, keep your phone on, mate, I'll have her by the morning. I'll never forget that. And I didn't even bother putting a shell.
You didn't necessarily believe yourself.
I knew I had a great chance. Because the lake was quiet. She was totally due. That was a great area for her, and Heather was interested in that. When she was close to being caught, she would surge across the surface, so everyone would say, man, she's close now, look, she's doing her thing, and she would like power through the top layers, and you would see that those big shoulders and those grey shoulders. And I remember it was roasting hot. I think it was the 28th of July, really, really hot. I didn't put a shelter up. I just had a brew kit in my bed chair, and in Des's, it was a bit of a weird swim. Most people would put their rods in the water just off this little kind of drop downy slope. I did that. I didn't even set an alarm, and I remember waking up. It was still dark, and the left-hand rod on this long spot was absolutely melting off. I remember the buzz bar had twisted. I can clearly remember that. So it was at such pace that the buzz bar had twisted out, and lines burning off the clutch. Yeah, picked up the rod, and she was miles out by this stage, and it was a crazy battle, and I was the only one on the lake, or so I thought. I later found out someone had done a quick work night in the gate, and yeah, I can remember her getting stuck in weed for a bit, and there was a lot of logs at Yateley, and people used to use them as chairs, and I remember there was a boat just to my left. I remember thinking, I've used a boat at Berfield, not a big hard boat like that. I remember thinking, I don't know if I fancy going out in that boat and trying to do this all from there. That could go seriously wrong. And I thought, shall I phone someone? And in the end, I thought, I'll stand on this log and just see if I can get her moving that way. And it worked. And I got her moving again. And I can remember in the half light, the first time I saw her, I can remember the lead core coming into view. And she's coming at me head on. I can just remember the head and then these like colossal shoulders. And yeah, I can just remember like slipping the net under her, and I didn't even look. I knew it was her. And with that, this guy walked in who was setting up for that morning, and he said, you know, what have you got? I said, oh, I've got heather. I remember sitting on my bed chair and just turning the kettle on, like absolutely spun out.
Bit of Yateley reflex, that was flicking the burner on. Surely,
yeah,
just
sat down, like she was calling the net, and he said, are you sure it's heather? And I said, oh, I'm sure, like, and he said, oh yeah, it is. It's definitely heather. And yeah, it's interesting because you kind of, Yateley is synonymous with those carp of a sea of unhooking mats and 20 anglers. It wasn't like that at all. I phoned literally a couple of people, and I think there was 4 of us that did that. That is actually, that picture's taken in Des's. So
it's a lovely shot, to be fair.
Yeah, Phil. It's nice because you can kind of just sit the top right. You can just see the light of the sun coming through and just starting to hit the back trees.
Unusual in the day, yeah, to get a good shot as well because of how dappled it is there.
Yeah. So I rung Alan, who comes straight over. I rung Benny Hamilton, James Davies, and Odd, who was the head bailiff, who was well into photography. And I rung Odd because I knew I'd get the shot from Odd. And I can remember we really struggled. I mean, it's 50 pounds, so it's heavy anyway. But she had a saw, which you can't quite see under my hand there. And every time I would rock her up and put her weight on it, she would flinch. And it was killing me. I was trying to hold 50-pounder up.
You can sort of see it in your face.
You can kind of see it, yeah. And I can remember all of a sudden, there was just a moment where I got her into position and I heard like Odd spray and pray. And it was like the most relieving sound. I thought he must have a shot out of that lot. And then I obviously, like, we were on digital cameras by now, and obviously I lowered her down. I did actually, you can't actually see it, I've got my sleeping bag on the floor as well. And Odd had said, I've got a good shot, Phil. And we did some returners as well. And yeah, just what carp. I mean, even now, I've never seen another carp like that, really. Just so unique. And yeah, to spend all those months and years looking at like Terry's book and stuff, and then just to see it, it's just very surreal.
How many nights is that in by now?
It's about 120 nights worth of blanks for that bite.
Worth every one? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you don't count the blanks afterwards, do you? I mean, yeah, it's happened now. So it's, in all honesty, if someone would have said you'll have to wait 3 years, but you'll catch heather, I would have signed that contract there and then, mate. It was it's a proud moment. Yeah, it means a lot.
In terms of the way you tripped her up, you said you put the rod out. Were you simply spinning the wheel again in tactics? Was a few nuts, pinch a hemp sort of thing, or
no? I baited quite heavy. I had these prototype pellets. I was using CC Mall baits, and we had these green pellets that were like loaded with spirulina and stuff, and they're a bit different at the time. And I'd started using them, and I remember putting some in close and getting a good reaction to them. And I thought, well, there's something in these. They obviously like these. But yeah, bit of hemp, little tiger nut hook bait. Interesting enough, that was caught on, what was the hook length that, was it Hybrid Soft? When they released a soft hook length. It was caught on that. Everyone was on the braids, and I was almost all in on that approach, but I remember the hook length, I didn't want the braid on. I wanted to keep the coated braid on. And yeah, she was...
but you are stripping a bit of that, are you?
Yeah, a little bit coated baits. It was what you call a flipper rig now, essentially.
Like with the silicone round the bend?
Yeah, silicone round the bend, yes. A very short hook length. Atomic used to do these bottle inline leads that were like gravel coloured. And I remember having gravel over there. One thing that the car park did make you do is you kind of looked at all of that stuff. Anything that glinted, or anything where there was a gravel colour and a weed colour and a silt, you always matched to what you were. Nowadays, I don't really care about stuff like that. I don't get into it like that. But back then, yeah, if I was on a gravel spot, it was a gravel lead, a gravel hook length, the gravel lead core. When I caught Arthur, I was fishing a dirtier spot, and I changed it. It was a darker coloured lead, dark lead core, and all of that. So yeah, it definitely made you look at all of that stuff, and you know, putty all up because you're bait boating. I can remember having loads of putty up for like maybe a good rod length, so everything was well pinned down.
And were you using a marker float to position your rig?
I used a marker float in the bait boat. So basically, I drove into a horseshoe of weed and dropped the marker, or waited till the boat hit the weed, dropped the marker there, moved the boat to the right, and I kind of just tweaked the float, and I felt it fall out of the sketchy bottom and then hit the money spot, which was machine gun gravel. And so I popped the float up there, brought the boat back, and then I dropped alongside the float. So I knew I was there was about a foot in it from when the boat hit the weed to what you come back. So I was at the back of the spot because I wanted a bit of line lay across the flat bottom because it very quickly hit weed again. And I think that's where some people went wrong with that spot. They tried to fish the front edge and they had terrible line lay into it. Whereas if you putty everything down and you fish the back and you only feed at the back, I felt like, although those carp will be swimming over your line, they're swimming over it and it's all well down on the bottom anyway. So yeah, I did that, yeah.
So no liners during the night? Just
nothing at all. Just
which is what you'd want to hear.
Yeah, so yeah, just a one-noter.
And the hook hold, Phil? Was it? No.
I couldn't take it out. I was shaking too much. I remember trying to get it out. I think Ben said, yeah, I'll do it. And I do remember that actually. Yeah, well nailed.
Because she rocked, always renowned for
fighting, and that was the thing. Early on, I was pretty sure what I was playing because of the length of the fight, and I think the Big Orange was another one that was well known for fighting, and that had been out a couple of days before, so it's pretty obvious what I was playing. And
so it's going to sound odd, but you've caught, one of the finest fish in the land, the queen of the lake, let's say. Does that necessarily mean that you're even going to go back into that swim the next trip?
I couldn't get in there.
Right.
I might have done. I never got back in that swim again. I didn't want to for much longer. I mean, that was the other thing about the car park, is that it was pretty obvious. If you said, well, I want to catch that one, you could... Yateley Angling Centre used to have in their shop window the last 7 or 8 years, and it would have the carp in the swim. And you could literally go, well, if you want to catch Heather in the summer, she comes from that swim, that swim, or that swim. So once I caught Heather, I switched all my attentions to Arthur, and I don't think Arthur had ever been caught out of Desi's. So it was the allure of getting back in that swim. It was over then anyway. I started to push further up the lake, and it was all about the curly, the bars, and the snags.
Tell us about the character of that fish and why it was so sort of territorial and the way that
Arthur.
it fed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird one. There can't be many carp that Terry Ann's not caught, can there? Like targeted and caught. So I don't know. I mean, I've often thought that. I mean, when you watch it feeding close, some big fish, they always look quite clumsy, and you see them on baited areas and you think, well, I can see how that gets caught because it's quite aggressive and it nudges those smaller ones out the way, and the way it moves, it can be a bit jerky and it moves around and you think, yeah, I can see why it gets caught. You watch Arthur, and he, or rather she, would just very slow and sedate, and never any movements that would just looked always in control. Never would get in what I'd say a frenzy where it's kind of lost itself in the moment of feeding. And I think with Arthur that all of those bits needed to be absolutely key, and it probably didn't feed in a pack very often, so it was able to feed at its own pace. It clearly loved that top end. That top end wasn't great for the others, so it didn't have the same rod hours up that top end that the sort of middle end did. Certainly like the chair, if there was going to be a swim empty, it would be something like the chair.
Which is mad, because that's where, you could campaign for Arthur, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's what happened, is that so when I'd caught Heather, all of the anglers that particular year, none of them had caught Heather. And so they all knew, well, there's no point me fishing the snag swim and the chair swim. If I want to catch Heather, there's no point being there. So it fell into place for me. The year before that, the first year, I was up against 5 or 6 guys that had caught Heather, and they were all gunning for Arthur. And it just worked out that the next year wasn't like that. And so Benny was fishing for Arthur the first year, and he caught it. So he was kind
November.
of off. That was November. Yeah, that was November. Yeah, really big weight. I obviously caught it a year on from Ben, a kind of month earlier, just as she started feeding heavily.
Well, it's today, wasn't it?
It was actually today, yeah. I just worked it out on the way up. 14 years today. Yeah, 5th of October. Which is, I don't know why, because I can't really recall any of the capture dates. I can remember Heather, 28th of July, but I can't really remember any momentous captures since. But that after date of October the 5th, just always sticks in my mind.
It's got tiny fins. We're looking at a picture now. Deep-bodied fish, great big head, beautiful, overslung mouth, and these tiny. You can't imagine it disturbing the bottom much with those pecks, can you?
No, and it didn't, to be fair. And I mean, I think that Yateley strain, and I just think Arthur, it is the quintessential Yateley fish. Little stubby fins, little withered tail, that kind of mottly skin, the big shoulder. They always had those shoulders, didn't they, that strain? And, it had a massive mouth, Arthur did. Like, it's a massive mouth.
Do you think that's why, Phil, was it outside of this control that it exercised? Why was it difficult to catch? Just down to that, it's just a rig thing.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, going back to what I said earlier, it might just be that it never really got overly dominant on a spot and dropped its guard. I mean, if you see it on the top, don't you? When you see some fish, they almost switch character midway through, and you just see them Pac-Maning through, and you think they're kind of so engrossed in feeding now. Maybe Arthur just never got like that. I mean, I never saw it like that in the edge lose control. It would have a little bit of feed, it would slowly move off. Whereas other carp would come in, they'd be twisting, turning, and you think, okay, well, if they were to pick something up and then make that movement, you're going to hook it pretty quickly. It was never like that with Arthur. I think he'd come into, when it was overfeed, it would suck and blow a lot. Once it was happy, it would kind of rinse the bait out, and then it would move off. And in fact, when I caught it, I'm pretty sure that she rigged me out. Well, I'm almost sure. The first night I got liners all through the night and had to tweak a few things up, and then caught her the second night.
Well, tell us a story, Phil.
That was into October. By that stage, I'd started baiting the snag swim. I knew that Arthur loved the margins, but a couple of the good spots at the time, there was anglers dumping bait on them. I don't even know whether they were car park anglers. They could have been anglers from
the Split or something.
The Split, possibly. But there was a couple of really obvious little walkways into these little view. Some of them even had like camo netting up, so it's pretty obvious to people, there's a bit you can go and view the carp in. And there was these I remember Ben the year before, he was like using his landing net to try and clean these spots off, because there was just big boilies sat on them. I don't know who was doing it. Could have been sabotage, but possibly split lake anglers
just dumping bait into the carp.
Yeah, dumping a kilo of 20 millers in. But so I knew that fish liked margins. And I thought, okay, well, I can't control what's happening on these margins here, but there's a little island. I should have put the shot there, but there's a little island basically that separates Brute's Corner. And I thought, well, she must spend time around that island margin. If she likes the margins of the bank so much, she must get around that as well. So in the close season, we were doing some work, trimming back the islands and getting old tackle and stuff like that. And I had a prod off the side of that island in the boat, and I found a little bit that flattened off just off the side of that island. I thought, that feels wicked, like compared to the rest of it. It was all quite slopey and quite soft, and erky. There was just this one little bit where it's like crunch, crunch. Well, that feels better. And I could tell it was flat. So yeah, so if you zoom in, Tobe, and go to
where your cursor is, right? Just bring it down and to the right
there. So zoom right in there.
So which corner is this? So that you can't even see the island.
You can't even see it, because that is
to the left of it there. That prominent bit to the left. Left. No, down.
Keep going
that's
down.
The island.
That's the island. So where your cursor is, keep going down, Tobe.
Yep. Keep going down
with the cursor, and to the right.
There's a swim there.
Yeah. There's a swim in those trees there, and off the corner of that island.
Let me just show.
So I'd found this little area, this little flat bit, and I thought, right, well, that's the spot to fish it from. And it was in front of a swim called the Snag Swim, which wasn't popular at all. I think Heather had once been caught from there, and the angler had fished well right. So really, it was probably one of the least popular swims. I think Dave Mallin might have caught Arthur from that swim from memory years back. So I started baiting it in September, and I was actually being really careful. So I would park up in the car park lake. Park up in the car park, socialise with the lads for the evening, and then I'd say my goodbyes, go back to the car, and then I'd walk with my bait boat and my bucket of bait all the way around the works bank, tiptoe all the way around there, come all the way down to the only swim on this top bank is the chair, and I would send the boat out, and I would bait up. I would come around the corner from the chair and creep back into the snag swim and bait the margin that way, and I'd put tape over my bait boat so the lights weren't letting everyone know what I was doing and stuff. So I wanted to keep it quiet. And
what are you putting out there, Phil?
Again, I was using those pellets. Must remember that they were I think they were like amino green 365 pellets. Black tiger nuts, which were, again, I had some samples of those. They weren't really out at the time. And some hemp and a bit of boilie, chopped boilie. And a few weeks in, I was fishing the bars swim, and there's a guy called Army Jim down for a work night, and he was next door in the snags. He's a right nice guy, Jim was, and he didn't get a lot of time at all. And we had a little chat in the evening. He said, I'm off to bed, geez, and I've got to be up really early. And I was in the bars next door. And it was a really cold night, and it was that. You always get that night in the autumn, don't you, where you think, right, I should have had the winter bag this particular trip. So I'd woken up in the early hours, really, really cold. And I remember putting the kettle on for a cup of tea. I just heard this, and I knew straight away it was in that. So I've tiptoed up behind Army Jim's brolly. I can see the ripples coming off the island, so I can see a big fish is showing off the island. And I remember peering round the corner of Jim's brolly, and he was still sound asleep. Just like, right, he hadn't seen it. So I've crept back to the bars, and I thought that's a really good sign. Like I bet that I was pretty sure it was likely to be Arthur. Jim's packed up in the morning, like much happening, and I did think about saying to him in the early hours, mate, one showed right off the honor, but I thought, I've probably got everything to lose here. Not that Jim would have jumped on me, but he was up there for a reason too. So I kept quiet. And yeah, a couple of trips later, I held off one more. What I would basically do is, the snags was, if no one was in there by 4 p.m. on a Friday, it was unlikely it was going to be taken. I would start in the bars, and if it was looking like someone was showing interest in the snags, I would say, oh, actually, I'll move in the snags. And they were quite often very happy to go, well, I'll have the bars then, mate, if you're moving out of there. So it gave me a couple more weeks of getting the bait in. And yeah, the first night I set up, there was a big weather front come in, big southerly winds.
Very similar to what we've just had.
Very similar weather. Lots of rain. I remember James Turner brought down a Chinese. I can remember that now. And we sat eating this Chinese, and this was a serious weather front coming in. And James left, and I stayed up for a bit, and I started getting liners around about 1 a.m. I believe. And you know what those Steve Neville buzzers are like. You do get, it sounds like you're getting a ripping bite at times, only using little white bobbins and stuff, and it was jumping up and down. There was clearly stuff going on. And
are you sort of cringing in case other people can hear this or not?
No, I don't think I would have been, because of the weather front. It was rough. Yeah, it was a loud night.
And
anyway.
Had you taken any of the boys into your confidence at that point about what you were doing? Like the likes of James, was he aware?
Yeah, James wasn't fishing the lake that year, but James knew what was going on. Obviously, Gaz was aware, but Gaz was still fishing for Heather, so it wasn't really interrupting his plans. James Davies was aware, but yeah, those were probably the two I was closest to. And the first night, liners for sort of 2 or 3 hours. It was obviously something had gone on. It didn't happen. When I wound in the next day, the hook point was destroyed. It had been just bounced around on the gravel. It was clear that I'd been turned, and I knew to get that amount of liners, and essentially sort of 3 hours of feeding activity, it was obvious that there's a high chance I'd been picked up and sort of rejected. So I shortened the hook length down a little bit. I lengthened the hair. I made the nut even more critically balanced. I put a lot less feed out the next night. And I put, from memory, a couple of extra back leads and I kind of arced the line lay a little bit as well because I was worried that there was a weed bed between me and the spot. So I drove the boat further to the right and gave it quite a lot of slack, so that by the time I dropped in, that line, I allowed the line to sink in a bit of a bow because I knew there was a better line lay there, and yeah. So in the early hours that second night, I had a really tenchy. I remember thinking it was a tench. I remember picking up the rod, and immediately there's a massive snag tree to your right there. It's a very tight swim. I picked up the rod, and I could feel a couple of taps, and I thought, oh, I don't believe it. Like, I'll never get the rod back on that spot now. It's just like 2-3 a.m. And then I've just heard it roll over next to those trees, and the noise is, it's like, this is definitely not a tench. And then it's darted left straight into Brute's Corner. I remember sort of holding it off of there, and it's come out again. And I can remember when Ben had caught it, he said, it was doing this really weird thing where it would roll on the surface, it would dive, and I could feel it almost spinning underwater. My line was sort of coming off its pecs, almost like it might have been sort of turning, and that started happening. And you're in that area, it's due out. I had a good idea it was probably Arthur, and yeah, kind of into the net. I remember going and getting the torch. There was like these paving slabs at the front of the swim that had all been stacked up. So it's a really steep bank. I remember having my foot on the landing net pole and sort of putting the torch on, and normally I don't really go too much in for that, but I did pause and think, please let this be Arthur. Turn the torch on, and there she was.
Super wide fish.
Very short. It was just under 49 pound there, but if you think nearly 50 pound of carp for how short that she is, it's the depth and the width is where all the weight is.
I mean, you've cherry picked two of the absolute best in their prime there, haven't you?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, Arthur was I wouldn't, not trying to discredit Heather in any sense, but Arthur was just the one for me. It's, it's you're either a tea or coffee man, aren't you, or a Heather or Arthur, and it was Arthur for me. So yeah, to leave with both. And that was October, and
you look drenched, by the way. You can see the mist beading up on your hands.
It's pouring down with rain as well. So
proper autumn.
It was,
conditions.
yeah. So basically, from that point, I had her in the net, and James Davies wound in from the curly, and he come and sat, and we drunk tea until the light. We did the photos really early still, so. I think Nige had come over, Al was there again. We got some video footage of it on that occasion, and it was pouring down with rain. I knew the shots were never going to be great, but I wasn't
There's a lot
bothered.
of atmosphere there, though, I think.
Yeah, I actually think that's a mega shot, that. I quite like that.
Yeah. It says autumn topes to me, like that kind of half light. I mean, bear in mind, it's getting light at just before 7 at the minute, so it would have been similar then. Yeah,
it was. And Nige took that shot, and it was pretty much the last shot we got, and you didn't have them out of the water. I mean, nowadays sometimes you see carp out of the water for ages. That was not the thing on Yateley. The carp care and things like sleeping bags on the floor, and there was the moment you had them out of the water, the clock was ticking, and you just, because these were such special fish, you almost wanted to get them straight back in the water as soon as you could. So we didn't have it out for long, and then I can remember Nice saying, "Oh, just lift him one more time," and then bang, and he was like, "Oh mate, I've got a shot for you now," and that's it. That's my favourite shot of Arthur. It's probably one of my favourite shots that I've seen of Arthur. It just so happens that I'm the lucky one holding it.
See I know it sounds a bit cliche, but you can see the sort of the patina on its skin, like in between those wrinkles. And stuff.
You can really see the age there, and and the mouth. I don't usually like return shot or any capture shots where the mouth is extended like that.
I do. I think they're the best ones.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, I don't like that. I kind of prefer them in. But on that occasion with Arthur, because it was I actually love that. I always think coming in and hoovering up that little black nut. And
the story is so atmospheric because of the autumn setting and the fact that you'd prepped it for so long, and the fact you knew it was on as well.
Yeah, I probably do think of that as my best ever capture. It is a highlight moment because I think it was such a hard fish to catch anyway, like they all were, but that one in particular, and it really felt like I did it by design, having to make those rig tweaks. the baiting, the fact that I was able to bait towards it. It felt like the first carp I properly really targeted and caught, so it was a big moment.
Can I ask why you lengthened the hair and shortened the rig? Because that seems counterintuitive in a way.
Yeah, so I shortened the rig because I was a little bit conscious that if I was going to make something very, very wafty, I didn't want too much play. I needed to kind of bring that lead back into size. I was using a 4-ounce lead, but it's all breakaway on the car park because you're doing everything with a boat. It just felt like the way to go. I mean, yeah, you weren't often tweaking on there because you were getting so little feedback to tell you to tweak. It was just that it was quite obvious from that very first night, something's not right here. You need to change something. I remember changing the hook as well. There was a Ben had given me some prototype hooks from another company, and I used that the first night. They did look great, and they were very sharp. This is before hook sharpening, so you were trying to find sharp hooks at the pack. But I remember switching, thinking, why have I taken off? I've caught Heather a couple of months on that. I'll just go back with that. So I changed the hook as well. So slightly larger hook, longer hair, smaller nut, much more balanced. And yeah, I think if I'm honest though, it was the fact I didn't have as much feed out there. I think that I probably overfed it the first night. That was probably the main thing that helped.
Now, I remember reading about these at the time, and you wrote about them really nicely on the CC Moore website.
Yeah,
I remember there was like a long form article and interspersed with the pictures and stuff. And in a way, I want to use this as a bit of a segue to get into what seems like quite an unlikely direction for you as you sit in front of me now, but you were going to get quite close over the next few years to CC Moore, and you were going to be heavily involved in their media output, which was, it has to be said, amongst the first kind of companies to do video properly and had us all tuning in, the CC Moore TV thing. How did that whole situation come about? Because you were quite a quiet guy, but your presenting was good. How the hell did you end up doing that?
Totally by chance. So Alan by that stage was employed by CC Moore, and as I alluded to earlier, Alan had a camcorder, and when he was fishing Berfield and over Colmere and stuff, he was starting to document his own angling. Now I knew he was never going to share that, but he was starting to take an interest in filming, and the multimedia thing was kind of bubbling away. And I think CC Moore was a bit of a kind of sleeping giant. It had the potential to go massive, but it needed a guy like Al to go. I think Ian will agree. It needed someone like Al to approach him and say, "Look, we could do this with this," And I guess Alan and I obviously were good mates. How the whole video thing started is I was fishing a lake in Marlow that had a really cool common in it. I was over there early spring, and Al had said to me, I'm thinking of, doing some videos for Ian. Do you want to be involved? And I said, well, yeah, I give it a go. And he said, why don't you just talk for a rig? I can remember this key now. So I'm sort of sat on this little bucket with this sort of hinge rig that I was using with a coated braid, and it wasn't out at the time, so it was something that I could talk about at kind of length. And Al said, well, I'll turn the camera on and we'll just see how it goes. And I talked for 9 minutes on this rig with no stopping. And we kind of finished it, and then I kind of looked at Al and went, that was all right, wasn't it? And he went, mate, that was like 9 minutes. So I think the pair of us were like, let's try this. So we just went from there. We just started to make some videos.
And for context, Phil, YouTube isn't really a thing at this stage.
No.
So if
I didn't even have an iPhone.
No.
So I didn't even have.
Were iPhones even a thing? I don't even know. But
maybe not.
No, it was still like Nokias and.
Yeah, sure.
So this is pre-YouTube, really. Or certainly if it existed, it wasn't a big thing for carp fishing. So CC Moore had to build a platform to show this stuff. I mean, how did that all? Because I know at one point they wanted to employ you, actually, didn't they? As well.
Yeah. So I started to work with a company who were web designers and was helping out. Not so much with how the video would be delivered and how that operated. Mine was more the creation of the website, building the angler's profile. So I was doing a lot of that. That was freelance, and I was being paid to do that. I was doing that so I would do that in the evening. So I'd come home from work, and I remember I'd have like half an hour to talk to this company before it shut for the day as well. So I'd have a quick phone call from sort of 4:45 till 5:15 with a lady called Julie, and I would say, oh no, I prefer that text and change that.
That's the old train going over, by the way.
Yeah. It's a nice
right on time, that one.
It's a nice feature.
Yeah.
So I was doing that. I can't recall how, I'm assuming Al dealt with the kind of technical side of getting the videos uploaded to their website. And Al was doing all the editing. I didn't get involved in any of that. I went from doing stuff myself to then kind of anchoring the show, I guess, presenting and interviewing. And it was great. I mean, we had a great group of guys at the time who were on the top of that. I can see why it was the success that it was, because it didn't really have any competition. It had people like Gaz, Benny, Dave Mag, who else? Kev Wilson, Jake and Dan, obviously. Marcus.
Miles.
Yeah, Miles. Sorry, Miles. Yeah. So we had some great guys, and the content was good, and it was quite well received for a while.
Yeah, I remember looking at it. I mean, you even had like the new CC Moore news and stuff. It was right. Like quite crazy.
A lot of that was Al. A lot of that was Al's. I wasn't as creative as Al.
Right.
He had almost like the kind of fast show element.
Yes.
There was some comedy from memory as well, wasn't there? Like worked into it.
Mad.
Really mad. Yeah, it was a bit.
But it's
presumably
it was a huge success for CC Moore and drove a lot of traffic to their website as a result, because there was nowhere else to watch these films.
Well, yeah, and I think was the trip. I don't know if Odyssey XXX was out at the time, but that was a boilie that did really well for CC Moore and kind of put them on the map for big fish angling.
But the efforts of you guys must have done a great deal for that as well.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, Ian's a workaholic. I mean, Ian is a workaholic, and I think whatever he turns his hand to in life, he's going to make a success. And you have to remember with CC Moore, they already had a successful family business 4 years in animal feed. So they had all these worldwide connections buying those kind of products, which is what took them to the carp food in the first place and the carp baits that they were creating. And I think Ian probably just needed a little bit of a big carp element brought to it. And then this thing just kind of flew for a while.
Do they still exist, these films? Because they must. I don't.
Oh, you're not going to put
No. We will spare you that, Phil. We'll spare you that. But,
I mean, I found something, but
I mean, pop it up, Tobes. We'll make a call on whether we're going to play it or not in a second.
What have you found?
What is this?
No. That's
later,
something else. No, that's something else. That's not it.
Yeah. No, I think you'd struggle to find it, Phil. I don't know.
I've been looking for a while.
I feel like they've gone. I feel like all that archive is somewhere that now isn't, which is a shame, because actually I think I'd like to.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to.
So you had the John Timmerman stuff, which is obviously a very, very long running series, The Drive and Survive.
Yeah, and that was done. I think John shot that all, and he might have even edited it.
Still does. We've got him on the Photography site now. All of John's stuff is on there.
Right,
now. I mean, he still does stuff independently as well, but he's been going an awful long time as well.
Yeah, he has. But yeah,
I know. I remember speaking to you at the time, Phil, and there was a. Like I say, there was a moment when your career you had a choice. All of a sudden, you could leave the comfy job and go and do the angling media thing, and you decided not to.
Well, the problem is that
it was a bit early, if anything. You were almost they were among the very first angling media jobs that anyone had done.
Yeah, I think for a large time, it was looking like that was the path that I was going to go towards. But I think what happened is that I'm still at home, so I haven't got a mortgage or anything. And I think the problem is neither of those two options, so the job that I had at the time or the CCM stuff, were going to pay me enough for me to go one way or another. It was a combined wage, so I was getting paid from CC Moore on a freelance rate, which was nice. It was a good package, but it wasn't a package I could live off. When you bolted that onto my everyday job, it worked well, and it was fine, but I couldn't do both independently. And I looked at it, I just remember thinking at the time, well, I guess it was the right decision, that it was a safer route to stay in engineering, and there was an easier career path there. And to be fair, Alan and I had some kind of, I think, creative differences is how you term it these days. And
amazing,
there was some stuff like that was kind of going on. And yeah, I just went that way.
The maddest thing is, Phil, that you wouldn't immediately put either you or Alan in those roles now.
No.
And you've both disappeared off the scene anyway.
Yeah,
in terms of publicly, at least, haven't you?
Yeah.
Not that Alan was ever really there publicly. He made sure to have you in front of the camera a lot of the time.
Yeah, quite unique when you look back. Yeah, it was very different. But it was great fun. And
I remember was the one called Nocturnal Beats with Alan and Ben. It just all seems so unlikely now. With Alan Welch
what
and
was
Ben,
that? Where was
I think they were walking around Pinge or something, from memory.
I do remember
Ian
that,
Bailey will remember because we used to love. I
remember. I can remember the biggest challenge that we faced is that it was essentially me and Al with a couple of cameras, and most of it was on one camera to begin with, and we would have to. It took ages to produce these things. If you can remember, like I used to do a rig piece, like Rig of the Month or something, and in order to do that, you'd have to shoot a whole film of me. As we are now, talking to camera, then we'd have to shoot the whole thing again with Alan over my shoulder for all the close-ups. And that would take ages to do. And it would be a day's work to try and do a rig piece that lasted, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 minutes.
I bet they were popular, though.
They were.
They still are.
And they were the most popular part of the show. Nothing to do with me. People love rig talk, don't they? Because that was the real technical element to the show. And, to be fair, there was some stuff rig-wise that we were putting out there that wasn't being publicised at the time, and it was turning heads because people were looking at setups. And I think even things like the Chod rig, you were either consuming it in a magazine format, but probably no one was going into depth with it on a video level. It was the time that it fell in. It was the perfect time for that kind of stuff to be landing,
And actually, all that investment in the CC Moore website and YouTube just completely wipes the floor with it. A few years later, presumably, it's all gone.
Yeah, it was a moment in time.
Yes.
And I think it nicely positioned CC Moore for a couple of years. They suddenly had a real credibility of a big fish outfit. They had guys like Gaz, Ben, Alan, myself. Lots of guys out there catching lots of big fish.
And in terms of accessible carp content, you had obviously Korda was doing Thinking Tackles, but there was nothing in the middle. Like that was the TV end of things, but there was no democratization of of carp media at that time. That you weren't able to DIY it, were you? Really?
No, and I think possibly the Thinking Tackle wasn't really on the kind of waters that we were. I mean, I remember going to a massive pit in Middlesex. I'm not going to name it because I think it's kind of fallen back off the radar, and so I won't name it for those reasons, but I did a piece with Ben there, and I think we might have just been talking about a Yateley capture, but to just go and film on waters like that, you weren't seeing that on Thinking Tackle. Thinking Tackle might have been at Linear and waters like that. So if that's your bag and you're reading Big Carp magazine, you're probably going to gravitate more towards the stuff that we were doing than maybe the Thinking Tackle these days is so diverse, but back then it was different. Certainly those first few years. So yeah, we just filled a gap, didn't we? We were there at the right time to fill a gap that people wanted, and we kind of run with it for a while.
If anyone's listening, CC Moore need to bring it back because that archive exists. Let's have the archive. Alex Grice, as we're calling Alex Grice out here. Let's get the archive.
yeah. Alex.
It's on the lock and key.
It's the Diana tapes.
Yeah. Exactly. But now, rigs wise, I still maintain you can find this photo, Toby. I did a feature with Phil called the Low Rig. If you just search Korda, the Low Rig, Phil and I did it at one winter on the Match Lake, and I think it's one of my favourite rig shots I've taken. But you are incredibly neat. He ties a neat rig. This guy, and you can probably see it. Those of us who are watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see just quite how neat his rigs are. But Phil, is it always something that you've done, that kind of incredible attention to detail?
Yeah, it's not a fishing thing. It's just my nature. It's a bit of OCD. My handwriting was very neat at school. My bedroom was always tidy when I was a kid, and I am a kind of everything in its right place.
Is that Rich?
That's it. Yeah. I mean,
so what year would that have been?
That was 2011, I think.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
It might have
or 2012.
Yeah,
I don't know if it will, Tobe.
There's some other stuff on there.
Yeah, but that just a mega like. I know there's not too much to that setup, but I just remember being really impressed by how bloody neat it was.
Well, it's that hybrid stiff I still use that now, and the fact that you can crimp it, so the crimping allows you to be absolutely precise. So there was that element to it.
I don't know this, right, but I still feel like, despite Dan, guys like Dan and obviously yourself in this case, having pushed or shown that over the years, I don't believe it's still that popular. I could be completely wrong. Yeah, I could be. Damien probably come in and tell me I'm barking the wrong tree, but there are.
It's a great hook length because.
There's another shot. Look.
Yeah,
that's even better, mate. Look,
that's a better shot.
3 up, 5 down. So you did have it.
There's those lips again. Yeah.
Did you catch a shot on that rig then?
I did. Yeah, I did. Mega. Yeah, but it was it would have been so that's with a cork ball pop up. It would have been an air ball pop up. In fact, the reason I was using that is coming back to me now. So the reason I started to go down that road is because the pop ups weren't as buoyant back then. Mm-hmm. So you need hinge stiff rigs and things like that where you're incorporating swivels and stuff. The air ball pop ups, I wasn't making my own hook baits at the time.
Yeah.
So I didn't have access to the level of buoyancy that in a hook bait you needed. So it kind of pushed me down this road where you can fine tune it, and you're basically just asking the hook bait to hold a size 6 wide gape up, know. And even the worst air balls would do that. I mean, what is great about that rig, obviously, is it's very unobtrusive, isn't it? I mean, it's a very low pop up. You basically just got the hook off the bottom.
Yep. It's again a bit like what the spinner does now, with a bit less metal.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, it's very simple. The mechanics are all still the same. Yeah, I mean, and that stiff hook length, fully extended from the lead, it just jobs them, doesn't it? So,
I mean, it's fair to say, and you even mentioned this before we went to record this. That possibly isn't the rig you're best known for, Phil. And in fact, 2 of you are quite well known for a certain rig. So talk us through the evolution of your version of the hinge rig.
You're on about the soft coated one,
yes.
Yeah, the Elliott Gray rig.
Yeah. So why is that controversial? Why is it? Why do you don't call it the Elliott Gray rig, presumably?
No, I don't.
I feel like there's a good story behind this.
We'd have to ask Elliott.
Is it convergent evolution? Is that what we're talking about here? 2 people come up with the same thing in 2 different distinct...
Yeah, possibly. Or Elliott might have had a subscription to CCMTV at the time or something. But no, it was... So that was a rig that... how it come about was... we were doing a piece with Gaz on Sandhurst. And Gaz was... I think he calls it Gamma rig.
Yeah.
That's right. There's a fluorocarbon that called Gamma or Gamma. I can't remember.
It's Gamma, yeah.
Gamma, yeah. And I remember saying to Gaz, "How are you joining those together?" And he showed me the Albright knot. And I was like, "Okay." And I remember going home and trying to practice that knot. But the only material I had was bristle filament and stealth skim. And I kind of tied it up. And it just so happened I was looking at it. I was trying to make the bristle filament the boom section, if you like. But for whatever reason, playing around with it, I suddenly was faced with it looking as the uprights, and it just like a eureka moment. I just thought, oh, hold on a minute, like that's cool. And once I played around with it, it just had so many benefits. The fact that you could tie the swivel off first, wherever you stripped that coating gave you the length of the boom. Wherever you folded the bristle filament gave you the exact height, and it was just a kind of. I don't actually think it is as effective as the hinge stiff rig with the swivel. I don't think you get that level of movement, but it has other things going for it. The softer boom, the fact that you can bring the upright section down a little bit. Every one you can tie and you have that repeatability. So yeah, I use that for a bit, and I featured it in a C7 TV.
Find it. It's out there somewhere, mate.
Probably out there, yeah.
I think Phil, Phil and I did an article at Pingewood from memory, Phil. On around that pallet side. I'm sure there's some pop-ups involved in that
possibly,
one.
Yeah, possibly.
But anyway, is it a rig you still use?
Not really, no.
Because Elliott doesn't use it either anymore.
Does he not?
No, I've not seen him use it for ages. No.
That's interesting because he caught a load. I mean, he caught a lot more on it than I did, but no, it tangled quite a bit. You had to be very careful with the tangles. I found that you had to have the right balance of stiff and supple nature to that coated braid section. I tried so many different coated braids, but they're moody anyway, aren't they? They change from batch to batch anyway. And no, I think there are better rigs out there. It's still a good rig. I mean, you still see it catch an awful lot of carp, don't you? But no, it's not. It's not.
You don't even you don't hear a lot about hinges these days, do you?
You don't really.
Generally.
No, not with spinners, and we've all come down a little bit, haven't we?
Which is a bit like the low rig, you know.
Yeah.
What are you chucking out these days then, Phil? If it's not,
I use 2 rigs basically. I use a spinner with a size 4 wide gape, so I use it. As it's pretty common with the boom, the crimp boom.
Okay, yeah. So the boom fluorocarbon.
Yeah,
stuff.
the 25 boom. Yeah, I use
yeah.
that one exclusively. I haven't actually. It's just come out in lighter gauges or heavier
balls
gauges.
Over there, we'll have a look.
Okay,
yeah.
So I've only used the first one. Is it 20 or 25?
I think it's 25.
Yeah. So whatever that first one was. Yeah. I've just used that exclusively with that.
Which is actually really quite similar to what we looked at with the hybrid stiff.
It is.
Isn't it?
It's exactly the same mechanics-wise. I can just change the hook now, basically, is the only real difference.
And you use a beak point, like a wide gape?
I use a wide gape, Kamakura, wide gape X
yeah.
size 4. I don't bother sharpening my own now. I just use those.
And do you think on waters like Dinton, for instance, that extra bit of sharpness is warranted, especially on your shorter trips? You know, I see a lot of lads, at least the way I rationalise it, I'll put a Kamakura type hook or a hand sharpened hook out when I feel like I need my absolute best stuff on the dance floor, and you know, potentially the situation would allow me to use a very fine point, whereas sometimes you need something a bit more robust, given that, you know, small fish or tench or weed or, you know, gravel or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I keep a real close eye on that because I always want to use that, but you do need, I mean, you must find the corrosion is another thing you need to keep a real close eye on. The amount of times I've wound in and it's like, oh man, look at that. Like, I wonder how long that was blunt for. And then I do like those size 4 curves straight out of the pack. They seem to have a really good point on them. Totally different hook, but they have a really good point on them.
It's a longer point. It's quite a long point.
It's a longer, thinner point. But if I'm getting issues like that, I'll go to one of those out of the pack. But yeah, thankfully, most of the time it's, and I put like, there's a beauty product that you can use similar to like a Vaseline. I use that. And that's natural products, and that stops that corrosion.
Yes. So you're using the spinner a lot.
I use the spinner a lot.
Yeah.
This
what about
year,
for hard on the deck?
I use that combi multi rig that Darryl sort of.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I love that, man. Yeah. I mean, it's so again, the boom material. You can change the hook, but I don't really keep using the boom over and over. I tend to just have a load of them made up, and I just take what. So I'm not using it for the speed factor. It's the mechanics again that I like. And I wonder whether there's something in that. So the multi's the only rig, isn't it, that will prick the fish, and then there's that movement, and there may be something in that. I don't know whether there's that gradual loading, and it helps with them trying to shake you off. The fact that as you start to put pressure on that rig, there's a bit of give in that rig still. There could be something to that. How
much are you looking at other people? You know, the likes of let's concentrate Dinton for the minute. I feel like we've missed a big chunk with Pingewood, and that was where we did that feature, which Toby's clearly having no luck finding. It's on there, mate. Maybe it's not anymore. I don't know. Yeah. But Pinge, I feel like, was probably another attritional like battle actually. But you did get Pecs at a big weight from memory, 40 pounds.
Yeah. I did okay on there. Pingewood for me was the start of trying to balance the work stuff. I missed large chunks of all 3 seasons that I fished on there, where it would get to kind of May time, which is really when you want to be winding it up on the fishing front, and work was just getting busier and busier.
This is when you're sort of trying to.
This is when I'm pushing my career. Yeah. No, I wasn't at that. I was trying to work towards that. Yeah. So all the extra hours that were being offered, I was having to say yes to them. Weekend shifts, all of that kind of stuff. There was one period where I was starting at 6 a.m. 6 days a week. So it's very hard. You know, I'd get home at 1 p.m. on a Saturday, and you just want to kind of crawl onto the sofa for the last day and a half of your weekend because you're about to do another 6-dayer. So the fishing was out the window at that stage. So Pingewood was the start of that transition into, okay, how am I going to balance this around trying to have a career at the same time? And it took a couple of years to find my feet with that. It really did. And it was probably only really Dinton when I started fishing there in, 4 or 5 years ago, where I felt like, now I'll tell you what, I'm missing a bit. So it would have been a water very close to Yateley. I caught a really big fish out of there on a work night, on a Tuesday night. Fish called Whiskers. It's actually my PB still.
And 54? Sort of?
No, it was.
It got as high as that,
I can't remember, mate. It was. I think it was just under 52.
Have we got the picture of that, Tobe? I feel like we've got Whiskers, haven't we?
I think I sent it over.
Anyway, but
yeah, so
really,
that was,
really renowned for being incredibly granite. That lake.
I mean it's So that's
enormous.
Yeah, it's a big carp.
You could have almost got that double belly thing going on where they are huge.
Yeah,
they get that sort of slight. I don't know how you describe that, but there's like a
almost stretched, isn't it? And
background vent sort of area.
But that was in the lake, very close to the Yateley complex,
literally over the river from the North Lake.
Yeah, exactly. You could cast from one to another, and it feels like you're just fishing another carp. I mean, that was really tough over there.
Harder than the car park lake.
It's up there. Yeah, it's up there. It's I did 4 stints on there and caught 4 carp. I managed 1 in each stint, and you're talking, 20, 30 nights a bite kind of thing. That was the highlight. Well, that was the one I wanted to catch anyway. And there was another big one in there which had gone over 50 pound, but that sadly passed away. So once I caught that one, I fished it for a bit after that, but the
fire had gone.
Pretty much. And the Dinton had started by that stage, but tough pit that is. That's a really tough pit.
So why the appeal for so you've managed this one whilst trying to balance work?
Yeah, so that was like the last of. So that was caught on a Tuesday night, and by that stage, that particular year, I was fishing Tuesday nights and Friday nights because of work, and I'd met Katie, now my wife. So I was trying to find out, how am I going to make this work now? And on that particular water, obviously being fairly close to home, it actually worked better doing 2 single overnighters than it did trying to do 1 session. Because to be honest, it felt like I was at the lake all the time, because you're there Tuesday, you're seeing a bit of it Wednesday, you're back Friday, you're seeing it Saturday. So you're there 4 days out of 7, albeit in a compressed time. So that was the kind of, that fish meant a lot, because it kind of told me, look, you can still go and fish for these epic carp that live in these really tough pits, and you don't necessarily need to be there 3 or 4 nights a week. I got lucky with that capture in some ways. I mean, for there to be 30 carp in there and to catch that one, that was one of the rarest carp in the lake. But I take a bit of luck on a water like that.
Of course.
You
sort of get repaid, don't you, for your efforts, I think. And that doesn't always mean time. That means putting yourself out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, just to take it on, I guess, is you got to sort of say to yourself, just to go and just think, well, let's see where we go with it.
And that's the thrust of this for me, Phil. The thing that I really want people to get from this is that you've never shied away, given the fact you just do weekends at best. Really,
no, because I mean, time is the biggest leveler, isn't it? There is no greater weapon to have if you know what to do with it than time. It supersedes everything, because it pushes everything towards you, closer towards you, in terms of the success that you can kind of obtain from it. But it isn't the be all and end all. You just got to use your time wisely. And I think that you see anglers with lots of time, and they might have a peak within a month period where they really dial it up and focus, and they'll catch their fish. And then you probably see, I don't know, anglers like Dan and Daryl, who probably have a lot of time, and they're just on it all the time, so they are in a different stratosphere then, because they've got that drive, and they've got time as well. And you put them two together, and it's a really dangerous combination, and it's always going to bring success. But I've always backed myself. I've never felt like, I mean, I am quite confident anyway. I am quite self-confident, but I've never thought to myself, I don't belong here and I won't be able to. Why not? Just go and give it a go. You got to back yourself, haven't you?
Was Pinge then the only time that resolve faltered a bit?
Well, it didn't falter, but I got to the stage with that place where I was obviously trying to catch the brute. I think on my 4th year, I can remember knowing where it was going to come from, and Oz Holness was down, and I'd booked the swim off of Oz and said, I think it might have been a Saturday morning, I can't remember. probably. But I said to him, when you go, mate, I'll have the swim. And he said, yeah, no worries. And Oz see it show on the last night of his trip, and he pulled an extra night. I think he rung his miss and said, look, I'm going to need another night here. I'm super close. Oz knows when he's close. And he caught it that next morning. And I just remember thinking, I can't do this anymore. I can't sit on this lake and chase in the fact that fish comes out 3 or 4 times a year, because I can't play that trump card of just pausing everything else for 24 hours. And I just reached a point where I needed a fresh challenge. And it so happened that, and it's not the nicest lake to go and spend a lot of time. It's bolted right next to the M4 motorway. And I was just ready for a break, ready for something new. And I started getting into that lake in Yateley, and to go back, Yateley, I've got such fond memories. It just reignited the fire. It was the right place to go, because I didn't really know anyone fishing the lake at the time, and I could just walk on there. No one really knew who I was. Not that they do now, but I could just go and almost press reset and go, right, this is phase 2 of it all now. How's this going to look? And caught that one, and it kind of gave me that boost. And sometimes a change is all you need, isn't it? Just to step away, press reset. And then Dinton come up. And and I've got a ticket for another water, obviously, that I dip in and out of as well. Can't say too much about that one.
No. But as regards Dinton, did you find that, because for probably the first time, Phil, in a while you haven't a particular target? Like, are there any number of targets? Did you find that was a bit of a relief and a release, in the sense that you can always go?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked a lot about this with mates. I think part of the appeal with Dinton, what I really like about that place, and it's hands down one of my favourite lakes that I've ever fished, is that, just like what you alluded to, if you hear of one of the big fish getting caught, you're not driving to lake with your heart sinking, thinking, oh, now what? You're just more fired up to get to the lake, because you think, okay, well, one of the other big fish is likely to be out. And that was the big thing I can remember with, certainly I first became aware of that at Yateley. I can remember one of the anglers catching, I think it was the dustbin in my first year, and someone said, that fish won't get caught for about 8 months now. And just when you hear that, all of a sudden you think, oh, yeah, 8 months. Like, it really puts it into perspective how hard and how high the stakes are. So Dinton's great. It's got a wicked stock of carp. They're out of this world, the fish in what they look like. The lake's really cool. Great bunch of lads down there. And you always feel like you've got opportunities. And there's guys down there with loads of time who are essentially full-time anglers. There's guys down there who get 1 night a week. There's guys down there who get 1 night a month. It caters for all different levels in that sense. And it's a good fit for me. For what I want now, it's a really good fit. I love fishing there. And there's some wicked carp in there. So
the lake we can't talk about, the syndicate, do you treat that as more of a holiday? Like, are you there less than Dinton? How do you split your time between
is it
a lot further for you?
Yeah, so it's a long way away. It's a big estate lake in Gloucestershire, so it's about sort of nearly a 2-hour drive for me, certainly with traffic. I tend to fish it in the springs. I have done some summer fishing over there, but it's very shallow, and it's got like 150 swans on there at times. So
this summer it would have been like a foot deep.
Yeah, it's been a real struggle for the guys this year, bless them, who have carried on. I didn't fancy it one bit this year, but I've done a bit of summer stuff over there. But I tend to use that for spring, so it's March and April really. Those are the 8 weeks over there. It's all long range fishing essentially. It's a lot of range fishing, which I'd never done, and it's a bit of a throwback, mate. It's a small syndicate anyway, but you can turn up and have essentially the lake to yourself sometimes. It's a very unique place.
Super contrasting to Dinton then.
Totally different. Well, totally different to anywhere I've ever fished. I've never, apart from Berfield to a degree, but but I go over there, and sometimes then that isolation, I don't like that for too long, and I feel like I gotta go back and have some social stuff again.
So you get a bit of both.
You get a bit of both. Yeah,
you have caught some tremendous fish from Dinton. We've got a couple of pictures, but certainly the John's Common, is it John's?
Yeah, so that's the biggest one I've had so far, which is so there's 6 carp, really big ones in Dinton. That is one of them. That's the biggest common in the lake.
Yeah, it's a great shape, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's put the water shot up, Toby, because I really think it's got tons of atmosphere again. So the returner.
So that was
that's big as well, right?
It's nearly 47 pounds. Yeah, it's PB common. Yeah. I love that black eye, like that really.
Yeah. Mega carp. Where is it, Tobes?
Keep going up.
Maybe we haven't got it.
Maybe it's not there. Maybe I sent it over on a different one.
You could dig that out, Tobes, but it's certainly a
Yeah, no worries.
You might be able to. Phil did send it, but I don't know if he did. I've certainly seen it, but it's a great shot of atmospheric shot of you returning that common in what looked like quite choppy conditions.
Yeah, and then some. I mean, it was pretty epic conditions. So, funnily enough, I'd fished all of the spring at the estate lake, and it had been a grueler for me. I'd got off to a bad start where I hadn't set up where I'd found the fish, basically, and I should have done. And for whatever reason, some crazy I overthought it, ended up in the wrong area of the lake. And I remember Dan was there, and he opened a can of whoop-ass on him round the corner and stuff. And I was scrambling from the off, and I felt a little bit on the back foot from the off of, right, I'm not in good form here, and the guys around me are catching, and I need to sort of get on my A game here. And as the weeks ticked by over there, we were getting really crazy weather that spring, where it was just super cut. There it is.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
It's all right,
That's
mate.
all right. Yeah, so you can see there. So that coincided. The first, so basically, I'd had a spring to forget on the estate lake, and because I go there so infrequently, it's a big part of my year, those sort of 8 weeks over there. So I was on a real downer when I left there, and I bounced to Dinton, and the very first trip, it was like textbook stuff. I turned up and it was flat calm. I knew this massive low pressure, huge southwesterly wind was going to come in. I knew the area of the lake that they'd probably end up being in. And I proceeded to see 20 carp shows, including that one, boom out at first light on that morning. It was a swim I'd never fished before. And Dinton's obviously weedy and stuff. And I cast, once all the shows had gone, I cast a lead out, first chuck to where they're shown, and it's just gone donk and hit some clay, which is kind of the money spots in Dinton anyway. And I've sort of got a clean sweep and thought, great, there's a spot. I'm obviously using braided mainline, so I've just clipped it straight up. I've had one cast to the left. Right, I can squeeze 2 rods in. It's only 2 rods. I've put the I won't get into what I was doing. I was doing something a bit different, but I put my 2 rigs out there. I had the first bite within like an hour and a half, and then I had another one, and then I think I had 3 fish that first evening. And there was guys that had fished there all spring for nothing at this stage. I timed it perfectly, and yeah, I caught that one the following by sort of mid-afternoon. That big low had come in, and it was raging at that stage. And the lake fished really well that weekend. But yeah, I had that one first light the following morning, and in fact, when I was playing it in the waves, I could see that it was big common, and then I saw that black eye, so I knew what it was. And yeah, that's a PB. In fact, that's my first £40 common. All these years of trying to catch a £40 common. Thankfully, it was a special one like that.
Yeah, and actually, the Berfield common was about that big when you were first starting. When you first had a chance to fish for one.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a fair bit bigger now. It's safe to say if it comes out. But
I mean, that fish is really old, and
it's a great carp.
Yeah, it's a lovely fish, really underrated, and it had lived in one of the reserves. A lot of the fish in Dinton have been moved from surrounding reserves over the years, and I think Simon, what he tries to do is, if he loses a big common, he'll try and get a big common from one of his reserves, or one that's going to push through. I think that one, for a long time, they'd known about it in another reserve. Eventually, it ended up in White Swan, and yeah, several years later, I got him. But
yeah, I mean,
lovely fish,
and a huge, really, a slice of reward for, you know, the efforts that you go to weekly. I mean, do you still fish weekly, Phil?
Yeah, every week. So I fish. Like I said, when it's on in the spring and the autumn, I fish Thursday, Fridays. I back off a little bit in the summer. You know, we'll go and have holidays and stuff like that. But I try and fish Thursday, Friday. I try and do 2 nights a week, Thursdays and Fridays. If it's really cock on for it and we're around a moon phase or something, I'll use some time from work, some holiday, and I'll do the third night. I'll either do a Wednesday night or I'll do the Saturday night. And still mad for it, mate. Really, it's never really left me in that sense.
That's fantastic. And do you think that actually the fact that you haven't been able to kick the arse out of it means that you're still fresh and raring every week?
I don't know, because I've got friends that have had. If I look at someone like Nige, for instance, Nige has always had a lot. He's always made sure he's had that time, and I think he's still as mad for it as he's ever been. So I'm not sure in that sense, but I've done it for like 25 years. I don't really know any different now. So it would just, it is just such a big part of my life that I kind of. It's never, the drive has never dropped. You know, I've never felt close to a burnout. Whenever I've got to that stage where I'm not really enjoying this, I just have a couple of weeks off. You know, I don't force it. So I've never got to that stage where I'm kind of resenting going to the lake. I always used to say that if I have a time off work and I'm not going in the evening off work and I'm going early the next morning at first light or on the road to get there for first, it's like Christmas Eve. And it's always that, you know, the buzz of packing the car, and then you know you're up when it's dark outside and you're on empty roads and it's pitch black. Just so it's almost like going on holiday, isn't it? That's quite often how you arrive when you're heading to the airport and stuff. You're on you're driving in the early hours and stuff. So yeah, every week I kind of feel like I'm going on holiday, and I love it, mate.
Well, look, long may that continue, and you are testament to the fact that you can pursue big carp whilst having a modicum of balance in your life, Phil. So
hopefully.
Thank you so much for coming in and sharing.
No, you're welcome. My pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Cheers, Phil.
Nice one.
The Thinking Tackle Podcast.